Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the Sage Knight of the Pokémon Fey Queen N. Naruto x Gardevoir x Valerie x Flannery Pokémon. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Whisperwood Grove. The concept of silence was a foreign one in the heart of the Whisperwood. Here, quietude was not an absence of sound but a symphony of life so perfectly harmonized that it felt like a tangible presence. It was the whisper of ancient leaves, the soft, rhythmic pulse of aura flowing from the heartwood of colossal trees, the psychic hum of 1,000 hidden lives breathing in unison. For the man who sat at its nexus, legs crossed upon a bed of moss that shimmered with captured starlight, this symphony was the very language of his existence. Naruto Uzumaki, the Sage Knight, was not merely in the forest, he was a part of its grand, unending composition. His eyes were closed, but he saw everything. He saw the intricate dance of mycelial networks beneath the soil, transporting nutrients and warnings in silent, fungal streams. He felt the slow, patient unfurling of a new fern, its fronds reaching for the perpetual twilight that bathed the Fey realm in hues of soft lavender and deep indigo. His senses, honed over 2 decades in this place of raw, untamed energy, extended far beyond the petty limitations of flesh. They were woven into the very fabric of the grove, a tapestry of perception that allowed him to feel the anxieties of a lone Spritzy lost from its flock and the deep, slumbering thoughts of the ancient Trevenant that stood sentinel at the grove's edge. He breathed in, and the world breathed with him. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp, loamy earth, the sweet, cloying fragrance of moon-petal blossoms that only bloomed in the Fey twilight, and the clean, sharp tang of ozone left behind by a passing Sylveon. This was Senjutsu, the sage arts, but not as any world he vaguely remembered from a life before this one would have understood it. Here, it was not about gathering external energy, it was about realizing he was the energy. A conduit, a nexus, a human heart beating in time with a world of myth and magic. His attire was a testament to his unique station. He wore no metal, for refined ore was a scream of pain against the gentle hum of the realm. His armor was a masterwork of Fey smithing, crafted from the shed carapaces of Durant, treated and hardened with aura until they possessed a tensile strength that could rival any steel, yet remained light as silk and silent as a shadow. The interlocking plates, a deep, forest green, were etched with spiraling patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the low light. Underneath, he wore a tunic and trousers woven from the silk of 1,000 Livani, dyed with berry juices and imbued with charms of resilience and stealth. His feet were clad in soft, durable boots made from sawsbuck hide, allowing him to move across the forest floor without disturbing a single fallen leaf. On his back, resting in a scabbard of petrified wood, was not a sword, but a staff of pure, unblemished hickory, harvested from a tree that had willingly shed the branch for him. It was a focus, a conduit, and in his hands, a weapon more formidable than any blade. A flicker of light, a momentary dissonance in the psychic field, drew his attention inward. A memory, unbidden. He was a child again, no older than 6, shivering not from cold but from a terrifying, soul-deep loneliness. He was small, lost, and crying in a world of concrete and steel, a world of harsh glares and whispered insults that felt like stones against his skin. Then, a pull, a warmth, the scent of unknown flowers and the feeling of being wanted. He had stumbled, chased by older boys, into a forgotten shrine at the edge of his village. A place where the veil between worlds was thin. He had fallen through, not into darkness, but into a world of overwhelming, benevolent life. The memory dissolved as a young Flabébé, no bigger than his palm and clinging to a pale blue flower, drifted cautiously toward him. It hovered just beyond his reach, its tiny black eyes wide with curiosity. Naruto did not move, did not open his physical eyes. Instead, he reached out with his aura, a tendril of warmth and reassurance that tasted of sunshine and sweet nectar. Peace, little one, you are safe here. The Flabébé tilted its head, its own minuscule aura signature pulsing with acceptance. It drifted closer, finally settling upon his outstretched knee, its flower bobbing gently. This was the essence of his duty. To be a bastion of calm in a world of potent, sometimes chaotic, emotion. He was the Queen's knight, but he was also the grove's anchor. He spent what could have been hours in this state of perfect synthesis. In the Fey realm, time was not a river but a meandering stream, pooling in places, rushing in others. The concepts of day and night were replaced by the subtle shifts in the twilight's glow, the washing and waning of the forest's own bioluminescence. He measured time in the slow, deliberate thoughts of the elder Trevenant, in the life cycle of a mushroom, in the patient erosion of stone by enchanted water. It was a pace of existence that would have driven a normal human to madness, but for Naruto, it was the only rhythm that had ever felt like home. He was tracing the path of a particularly stubborn route as it navigated around a crystalline geode deep underground when the symphony shattered. It was not a sound. It was a feeling, a tearing, grating, agonizing wrongness that ripped through the fabric of the grove. It was a shriek of violated physics, a scream of pain from the realm itself. The moss beneath him felt like it recoiled. The air grew thin and sharp, smelling of burnt metal and something acridly sterile. A scent he associated with the dimmest echoes of his first life. The psychic hum of the forest became a cacophony of panicked squeals and terrified roars. Naruto's eyes snapped open. The irises were a deep, piercing cerulean blue, but for a moment they flashed with a brilliant emerald light as he forcibly drew upon the surrounding natural energy to shield his immediate vicinity. The flabebe on his knee let out a terrified chirp and zipped away into the undergrowth. The entire forest seemed to hold its breath, the vibrant colors dimming as if a shroud had been thrown over the world. He rose in a single, fluid motion. There was no hesitation, no moment of surprise. There was only the problem and his immediate, unshakable resolve to face it. His hand went to the staff on his back, not drawing it, but resting on the smooth, familiar wood. A silent question passed from him to the weapon, and a feeling of steadfast readiness flowed back into his palm. "Show me," he whispered. His voice a low baritone that was rarely used but held a natural resonance, seeming to vibrate in the air itself. He closed his eyes again, but this time his focus was outward, casting a wide net of sensory perception. He pushed past the waves of panic from the local Pokémon, sorting through the chaos with the practiced ease of a master librarian. He was looking for the source, the epicenter of the discordant note. There, to the east, near the weeping barrows where the oldest spirits slept. It felt like a wound, a festering, unnatural tear in the skin of reality. His movement was poetry. He did not run. He flowed. He moved between the colossal trees, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. He was a whisper of green and brown against a landscape of shifting shadows. The forest itself seemed to aid his passage. A low-hanging branch of a ghost-type phantom would lift just before he reached it. A tangled thicket of thorny vines would pull back, creating a clear path. He was the knight of this realm, and the realm knew its own. As he drew closer, the signs of disturbance became more visceral. The air grew cold, a damp, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the cool twilight of the Fey. The ground was littered with wilted moon petals, their delicate luminescence extinguished. He passed a carbink, huddled and shivering, its crystalline body clouded with fear. Naruto didn't stop, but he projected a wave of calming energy as he passed, a momentary shield against the growing dread. "Hush, stone child, I will make it right." The scent of ozone was overpowering now, a chemical stench that was anathema to the organic purity of the whisperwood. He could hear it, too. A low, guttural humming, like a colossal insect beating its wings at a frequency designed to shatter glass. He broke through a final curtain of glowing moss-draped willows and stopped. The sight before him was an obscenity. In the center of a small clearing, the very air was torn open. It was not a clean portal, not a shimmering gateway like the ones that connected the Fey lands. It was a jagged, violent rip in space-time, about 10 feet high and writhing like a wounded animal. The edges bled a sickly purple and yellow light, and inside the tear, there was nothing. Not blackness, but a nauseating, colorless void that seemed to suck in light and hope. The very laws of physics were fraying at its edges. A nearby stone was twisting in on itself, its molecular structure being slowly unwritten. The grass around the rift was rapidly aging and turning to gray dust. Worse, the rift was exerting a subtle but inexorable pull. A small flock of Spritzy, their pink, fluffy bodies trembling with terror, were slowly being drawn towards it, their tiny wings beating frantically but losing ground with every second. They were caught in a psychic current, a vortex of unnatural energy that their fairy natures were uniquely vulnerable to. Naruto's face, usually a mask of serene confidence, hardened into a granite slab of cold fury. This was not a natural occurrence. This was an invasion, a violation. This was the work of hands that did not know or care for the sanctity of life. This was the touch of the other world. The human world. His first priority was never the threat, it was always the innocent. He lifted his hickory staff from his back, its simple form seeming to hum with latent power in his grip. He took 3 long strides forward, planting his feet firmly on the blighted earth. He would deal with the spritzy first, then the wound in his world. Hold fast, his voice boomed, imbued with the force of his aura. It was not just a sound, but a command that resonated in the very souls of the terrified Pokémon. He raised the staff, pointing its tip towards the struggling flock. He channeled his energy, not into a destructive blast, but into a focused wave of pure, benevolent force. A soft, green light erupted from the tip of the staff, enveloping the Spritzy in a gentle cocoon. The psychic pull of the rift was instantly negated by his superior, controlled aura. Gently, as if with a physical hand, he pushed them back, away from the danger, sending them tumbling into the safety of the deep woods. They scattered, chirping their thanks and terror as they fled. Now, for the wound. He approached the rift, the unnatural energy washing over him. It felt like standing before a furnace of pure entropy. The air crackled, and the fine hairs on his arms stood on end. He could feel it trying to pry at his own existence, to unmake him atom by atom. But he was a sage, a being in perfect balance with the world. He was an anchor of reality in a sea of chaos. He planted the butt of his staff on the ground. The moment it touched the earth, a network of emerald green light spread out from it, crawling across the dying grass and infusing it with life. The decay halted, held at bay by the raw power of nature he commanded. He rested both hands on the staff and closed his eyes, focusing his will. He needed to understand the wound before he could heal it. He sent a delicate probe of his aura into the rift's energy field. The feedback was immediate and violent. It was chaotic, artificial, a brute force assault on dimensional stability. He tasted numbers, algorithms, the cold, sterile logic of a machine. It was powered by something immense, something that burned hot and fast. Utterly heedless of the damage it was causing to the delicate membrane between worlds. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate act of reckless, ignorant power. His jaw tightened. The Queen would need to know of this. But first, he had to close the door they had so crudely kicked open. The process of sealing a dimensional tear was not one of brute force. To push against it would be to tear it further. It was a delicate, intricate surgery on the skin of the universe. He began to draw in natural energy, pulling it not just from the grove around him, but from the very bedrock of the Fey realm. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with immense power. The glowing patterns on his armor brightened, the lines of energy flowing and shifting like captured constellations. His hands left the staff, which remained standing, a beacon of order in the chaos. He began to weave. His fingers danced in the air, creating complex patterns of light, sigils that were part ancient language, part mathematical formula, part pure instinctual art. This was his craft, the unique fusion of his human heritage and his Fey upbringing. He was weaving threads of reality itself. From his right hand, a thread of golden light emerged, warm and vibrant, representing the life and order of the Fey realm. From his left, a thread of silver white, cool and firm, representing the fundamental laws of physics and space. He was like a cosmic loom master, preparing to mend a tear in the ultimate tapestry. He began to stitch. He cast the golden thread across one side of the writhing rift and the silver thread across the other. With a series of complex gestures, he pulled them taut. The rift buckled, shrieking a silent, agonizing protest as its chaotic energies were forced against the unyielding order he was imposing. Sweat beaded on Naruto's brow, his muscles bunching under his armor from the sheer strain of containing such a volatile force. He was holding back a hurricane with nothing but his will and the threads of creation. Slowly, methodically, he began to sew the wound shut. He wove the threads back and forth, each pass pulling the jagged edges closer together. With each stitch, he poured more of his own energy into the matrix, reinforcing it, solidifying the patch against the immense pressure from whatever was powering this rift on the other side. The air filled with the sound of grinding reality, a deep, groaning vibration that shook the very marrow of his bones. He saw flashes from the other side, sterile white walls, gleaming chrome machinery, the panicked, distorted faces of humans in lab coats. Then the images were gone as the rift narrowed. One final, agonizing pull. He brought all his strength to bear, his hands clenching into fists as he drew the last two edges of the dimensional fabric together. For a moment, reality seemed to fold, the world going silent and colorless. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap and a final, blinding flash of purple light, the rift snapped shut. It was over. The silence that followed was absolute, a true and utter void. The oppressive hum was gone. The chaotic energy had vanished. All that remained was a deep, circular scar on the ear, where the grass had been turned to ash, and the faint, lingering smell of ozone. Naruto stood panting for a long moment, the immense power he had been wielding slowly receding back into the environment. The strain had been immense, far greater than any natural phenomenon he had ever dealt with. He leaned heavily on his staff, his knuckles white. The grove, sensing the threat was gone, slowly began to exhale. The colors returned to the twilight sky. The psychic hum, though still shaken, began to find its harmony once more. A few curious Pokémon peeked out from behind the trees, their fear being replaced by awe. He ran a hand through his spiky, sun-blonde hair, a physical trait that had always marked him as an outsider here, even as his soul became one with the realm. He felt a deep, simmering anger. But it was tempered by the immense weariness of the task. He had healed the wound, but the scar remained, a testament to a threat that was growing, a threat he could no longer afford to ignore. He did not need to call for her. In the wake of such a profound disturbance, her attention would already be here. He merely had to wait. He didn't have to wait long. The air before him did not shimmer or tear. There was no grand entrance, no heraldry. One moment, the clearing held only him and the scar on the land. The next, she was there. She had not arrived. She had simply become present. Queen Gardevoir was a being of sublime and terrifying grace. She was taller than a human, her form impossibly slender and elegant, seeming to be sculpted from solidified moonlight. Her body was not flesh but something far older, a manifestation of pure psychic energy and natural life force. The green of her hair like fins was the color of the first spring leaf, and the red fin on her chest pulsed with a soft, steady light. A visible sign of her immense, perfectly controlled power. Her white gown flowed around her, yet it did not move with the breeze, for it was not fabric. It was a part of her being, an extension of her will. Her eyes, a brilliant, piercing magenta, held the wisdom of ages and a compassion so deep it was almost sorrowful. Naruto immediately knelt, bowing his head in place, acing his staff on the ground before him. It was not an act of servitude, but of profound, unshakable respect. It was the fealty of the knight to his queen, the student to his master, the rescued child to his savior. A voice echoed, not in the air, but directly within his mind. It was a voice like the chiming of crystal bells, ancient and resonant, layered with 1,000 thoughts and emotions that words alone could never capture. Less than rise, Naruto. There is no need for formality between us, especially not now. Greater than. He stood, his eyes meeting hers. He felt her psychic presence wash over him, a gentle but thorough examination. She was assessing the state of the grove through his senses, feeling the residual trauma, the lingering fear of the smaller Pokémon. She was also assessing him, noting the fatigue that clung to him like a shroud. The cold anger that still simmered in his heart. Less than the wound is closed, greater than she stated, her mental voice tinged with a deep melancholy as her gaze fell upon the blackened earth. Less than but the infection remains. You felt its source. Greater than. It was artificial, Naruto said, his voice low and steady. Careless. Brute force. I saw glimpses of its creators. Humans. The word felt strange on his tongue. He was human, by birth, but he had not thought of himself as one for a very long time. Gardevoir glided closer, her feet not touching the ground. The air around her smelled rain-washed blossoms and distant stars. She extended a slender, three-fingered hand, not to him, but to the scar on the land. A soft, pinkish glow enveloped her hand, and from the ashen ground, a single, tiny green sprout pushed its way into the twilight. A new beginning. Less than they have grown bolder, greater than she communicated, her thoughts laced with a weariness that spoke of centuries spent watching the younger races of the other world. Less than for generations, they have been content to draw power from their world, to live within the laws of their own dimension. But their ambition has begun to outstrip their wisdom. They drill and they claw at the walls of their reality, heedless of what lies beyond. Greater than. This was more than an experiment, Naruto countered, his gaze fixed on hers. The energy required to punch a hole of this magnitude, it was deliberate. They were trying to open a stable gateway. Less than they seek power, Sage Knight. Our world is saturated with it. Aura, life force, psychic energy, it is in the very air we breathe. To them, it is an untapped resource, a wellspring of infinite energy to fuel their machines and their ambitions. They are like children playing with a star, unaware and uncaring that its fire will consume them. Greater than. Her magenta eyes, filled with the star map of ancient sorrows, finally settled fully on him. The weight of her gaze was immense. It was the gaze of a being who had witnessed the birth and death of mountains, the slow crawl of glaciers, the rise and fall of entire ecosystems. Less than the accord is broken. Greater than. The words settled in the air with the finality of an extinction. The accord was the ancient, unspoken pact between the Fey realm and the burgeoning human world. A pact of non-interference, of mutual respect for the boundaries that kept reality intact. For this breach to have been so violent, so invasive, it was a declaration. Then I will deliver the response, Naruto said. There was no bravado in his tone, only a simple statement of fact. It was his purpose, the very reason she had raised him, trained him, and named him her knight. He was the enforcer, the guardian of the boundary. Less than this is not a matter of marching to their door and demanding satisfaction, greater than Gardevoir cautioned. Her mental voice softening, now tinged with a deep, personal concern that transcended her role as queen. Less than this is not a rampaging or searing you must quell, nor a territorial dispute between clans of Florges. The human world is complex, a labyrinth of factions and motivations. To strike blindly would be to invite a war we do not seek and to punish the innocent for the crimes of the guilty. Greater than. She glided before him, so close now that he could feel the faint, warm pulse of psychic energy emanating from her chest. Less than you must go there. You must walk among them. You must be my eyes and my will in their world. You must find the source of this violation, this, Ether Corporation, as your brief glimpse named them. You must understand their motives, their capabilities, and you must sever their connection to our home. Permanently. Greater than. Naruto listened, his expression unreadable but his mind absorbing every word, every nuance of her psychic communication. Go to the human world. The thought was jarring. He had spent nearly his entire life in the Fey realm. It was his home. The human world was a half-forgotten nightmare of cold metal, harsh noises, and loneliness. He saw the conflict in his own heart reflected in her gaze. She knew what she was asking of him. Less than I would not ask this of you if there were any other choice, Naruto. You are the only one who can. You are of both worlds. You understand the nature of aura. Yet you possess the innate drive and adaptability of a human. You can navigate their concrete forests and their rivers of steel in a way no other of my court could. Greater than. I know, he said. And his voice was firm, chasing away any lingering doubt. I will not fail you, my queen. A flicker of something akin to a sad smile touched her mind. Less than I know you will not. But I worry for what you will find there. It is a loud, chaotic, and often cruel place. It can change people. Do not let it extinguish the light you carry within you. That light is the hope of this realm. Greater than. She raised her hand to his cheek. Her touch was not physical, but a concentration of warm, soothing psychic energy that spoke of affection, of trust, and of a bond forged over 2 decades. It was the touch of a mother, a mentor, and something deeper, something that neither of them had ever dared to name. Less than I will open a gateway for you. It will lead you to the Kalos region, where the energy's signature of the rift was most concentrated. From there, your senses will be your guide. Be careful, my sage knight. The human world does not understand power like yours. They will fear it, and what they fear, they so often seek to control or destroy. Greater than. Naruto nodded, his blue eyes clear and focused. He reached up and briefly covered her psychic hand with his own flesh and blood one, a gesture of shared resolve. Fear is a currency I do not trade in. I will be the guardian you raised me to be. With a final, lingering touch of her presence, Gardevoir retracted her hand. She turned and lifted a hand toward the trunk of a colossal, ancient tree whose bark swirled with iridescent patterns. Chanting in a language that predated thought, she wove her own immense power into the fabric of the world. The bark of the tree rippled like water, and a shimmering, vertical oval of silver light opened within its trunk. Through it, Naruto could see a sliver of another world. It was blindingly bright, filled with sharp angles, vivid, almost violent colors, and a cacophony of alien sounds. It was everything the Whisperwood was not. Naruto gave his queen one last look, a silent promise passing between them. He turned, retrieved his staff, and secured it to his back. With a deep breath, filling his lungs with the familiar, beloved scent of his home one last time, he walked towards the gateway. He did not look back. He stepped through the shimmering portal, and the universe exploded. The gentle, harmonious symphony of the Fey realm was instantly replaced by a deafening, chaotic roar. The scent of damp earth and flowers was scoured away by the stench of exhaust fumes, cooked foods, and 1,000 different artificial perfumes. The soft, perpetual twilight was annihilated by the brilliant, harsh glare of a sun he had not truly seen in 20 years, reflecting off glass and metal in 1,000 blinding glints. The calm, steady flow of aura was gone, replaced by a frantic, jagged, and overwhelming storm of human emotions, anxiety, ambition, joy, anger, greed, love, all clashing and churning in a psychic maelstrom. His senses, designed for the subtlety of the Fey Wild, were being assaulted from every direction. For the first time in a long, long time, the sage knight of the Pokémon Fey Queen was utterly, completely, and profoundly overwhelmed. He stood frozen at the entrance to an alleyway, blinking in the harsh light. A mythical being stranded on the shores of a world he no longer understood. The gateway shimmered behind him and vanished, leaving only the mundane brick wall of a building. He was alone. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The City of Loom and Whimsy. The world that had birthed him greeted Naruto not with a gentle welcome but with a full sensory assault. It was a chaotic, and wilderness of a wholly different kind. The symphony of the Whisperwood was replaced by a brutalist orchestra of shrieking metal, the discordant blare of horns, the high-pitched, frantic chatter of 1,000 human minds, and the pounding, synthetic beat of music leaking from passing vehicles. It was a physical blow, a sonic battering ram against the serene shores of his consciousness. He stood in the mouth of the alleyway the portal had deposited him in, a statue of ancient grace amidst a torrent of modern vulgarity. The air was a chemical soup. It stank of heated asphalt, the greasy, cloying promise of fried food, the acrid bite of exhaust fumes, and the suffocatingly sweet fog of 100 competing perfumes. It was a dead air, stripped of the living, breathing scent of chlorophyll and damp earth. He took a single, shallow breath and felt his lungs, accustomed to the pure, energy-rich atmosphere of the Fey realm, protest in silent rebellion. His vision was similarly besieged. The soft, forgiving twilight of his home was gone, replaced by a sky of washed-out, hazy blue, dominated by a mercilessly bright sun. Its light did not shimmer through ancient leaves but ricocheted harshly off panes of glass, polished chrome, and the garishly colored metal hides of the machines that sped along the black stone pathways. The world was a riot of sharp angles, aggressive neon signage that screamed for attention, and a relentless, high-speed motion that made his eyes ache. Everything was moving too fast, too loud, too much. But the most profound assault was on his sixth sense. His aura perception, tuned to the deep, slow, and interconnected life force of the Fey realm, was now submerged in a psychic maelstrom. The minds of the humans rushing past him were not the serene, rooted sea consciousness of the Trevenant or the simple, pure emotions of a spritzy flock. They were a chaotic storm of jagged, fleeting thoughts and anxieties. A young man's panic about being late for a meeting. A woman's sharp spike of anger at a spilled coffee. The dull, thrumming greed of a shopkeeper. The bright, fleeting joy of a child with a sweet. It was a billion tiny, disconnected sparks of consciousness. A psychic static that grated against his own centered being. There was no harmony, no connection. Just a sea of isolated islands of thought, screaming into the void. For a full minute, he did nothing. He simply stood, a silent sentinel absorbing the onslaught. A lesser being would have been paralyzed, driven to their knees by the sensory overload. But he was the Sage Knight. His training, his very existence, was rooted in the principle of finding balance within the storm. He closed his eyes, shutting out the visual chaos. He took a slow, deliberate breath, filtering the chemical stench, searching for the ghost of something living underneath. He was a stone in a raging river. The water could crash and foam around him, but his core would remain unmoved. He reached inward, to the quiet, unshakable center of his own aura. The small, protected piece of the whisperwood he carried within his soul. He focused on the memory of the grove's hum, the feel of cool moss, the scent of moon petals. He used it as an anchor, a tuning fork to recalibrate his senses. The roaring chaos of the city did not lessen, but his perception of it changed. He began to filter, to sort, to compartmentalize the sensory data rather than letting it overwhelm him. The cacophony became a collection of individual sounds. The visual noise resolved into distinct shapes and people. The psychic static became a background hum against which he could now search for specific frequencies. He reopened his eyes. The world was still loud, bright, and chaotic, but it was no longer an incomprehensible monster. It was simply a different kind of forest. A forest of steel and glass, inhabited by a very different kind of creature. His first task was to find the trail. The dimensional rift had been powered from this side, from this region. An event of that magnitude would have left a deep, resonant scar not just on the fabric of reality, but on the life force of the world itself. It would be a wound, a patch of psy chic gangrene that the local flora and fauna would be recoiling from. He had to listen, not with his ears, but with his soul. Ignoring the stares of the passers-by, a few curious, some intimidated, saints simply too wrapped up in their own frantic lives to pay him more than a fleeting glance, he stepped out of the alley. His Fey-forged armor, a dark, matte green that absorbed the light, and the petrified wood staff on his back, marked him as a profound anomaly in this world of synthetic fabrics and consumer electronics. A tall, powerfully built young man with sun-kissed blonde hair that defied gravity. Piercing blue eyes that seemed to see more than they should, and an aura of calm, predatory stillness that was utterly alien. He moved with a liquid grace that was both beautiful and unsettling. Each step placed with perfect balance and intention. He placed a hand on the brick wall of the building beside him, closing his eyes once more. He sent a delicate tendril of his aura through the inanimate material, seeking the life that clung to it. He felt the stubborn roots of a weed in a crack, the frantic, terrified scurrying of a rattata in the walls. He pushed his senses further, reaching for the small, manicured patch of grass in a park across the street. There, beneath the storm of human emotion, he felt it. A faint, sickening resonance. A tremor of wrongness that made the very soil feel ill. It was a subtle corruption of the natural energy field, a lingering echo of the violent, artificial power that had torn a hole in his world. It was weak, diluted by the sheer psychic noise of the city, but it was a trail. And a trail was all he needed. He began to walk. He did not consult a map or a device. He simply followed the thread of corruption, a breadcrumb trail of spiritual decay. He moved through the crowded streets of what his mind, pulling from residual memories of his childhood, identified as Lumio's city. He walked with a purpose that parted the crowds before him, his intense presence a silent request for passage that people obeyed without conscious thought. The trail led him eastward, away from the grand, central tower that dominated the city's skyline, toward the city's outer gates. The journey took hours. As he walked, he observed, his mind a silent, analytical engine. He watched the way people interacted, the complex rituals of their commerce, the way they deferred to uniformed individuals. The strange bond they shared with their Pokémon, a bond that was so different from the symbiotic relationship he knew. Here, it seemed a strange mix of companionship, servitude, and competitive partnership. It was not better or worse, merely different. Alien. The feeling of corruption grew stronger as he left the dense urban sprawl behind, the psychic static of the metropolis fading, allowing the whisper of the wounded earth to become clearer. The trail led him down a paved route, flanked by unnaturally uniform trees planted in perfect rows. Eventually, the path diverged, and a sign, Written in a language his mind dredged up from the depths of his memory, pointed the way, Valerie City. As he walked the path toward the new city, the environment began to change. The air grew cooler, damper. A light, misty rain began to fall, not a downpour, but a fine, persistent drizzle that hung in the air like a veil. The world softened at the edges, the harsh sunlight replaced by a diffused, pearlescent glow. The scent of wet leaves and damp soil began to overpower the lingering smell of the metropolis. It was a balm to his senses. He finally crested a small hill and stopped, his gaze taking in the sight before him. Valerie City was unlike the cold steel and glass of Lumi. He finally crested a small hill and stopped, his gaze taking in the sight before him. Valerie City was unlike the cold steel and glass of Lumios. It was a place born from a dream. The entire city was built into, around, and upon a colossal, impossibly ancient tree whose upper branches were lost in the low-hanging mist. The architecture was whimsical, with houses and shops nestled into the larger roots and suspended from the lower branches by thick, woven vines. Glowing lanterns, housing the soft, pulsating light of Volbeat and Illumise, cast a warm, inviting glow that shimmered through the drizzling rain. The air here was cleaner, alive with the scent of damp wood, moss, and 1,000 different kinds of flowers. It was a human settlement that had chosen to live in harmony with nature, rather than conquering it. And the trail of psychic corruption, the sickening resonance he had been following for miles, led directly to its heart. It was a profound paradox. This place, which felt more like a distant cousin to his Fey home than any other part of the human world he had seen, was the source of the wound. He adjusted the staff on his back and began to walk down the path into the city, his soft sawsbuck hide boots making no sound on the damp cobblestones. The city's inhabitants were as unique as their home. Many were dressed in fanciful, flowing clothing that seemed to mimic the shapes of flowers and Pokémon. They moved with a slower, more deliberate grace than the frantic citizens of Lumios. Yet, as he passed, he still drew stares. Here, his strange, organic armor and the raw, natural power that clung to him did not seem merely out of place, they seemed like an ideal. A more primal and authentic version of the very aesthetic they tried to emulate. They looked at him with a mixture of curiosity, awe, and a hint of reverence, as if a spirit from the heart of tea. He Great Tree itself had decided to walk among them. He ignored the gazes, his focus turned inward, following the thread of wrongness. It was stronger here, a dissonant hum beneath the city's other wisps. Gentle and whimsical psychic signature. It led him through winding streets that curved around massive roots, past shops selling intricate lacework and herbal remedies, and over bridges woven from living wood. The trail did not lead to a dark alley or a hidden basement. It led to the very center of the city, to the largest structure of all, built directly into the main trunk of the colossal tree, the Valerie City Gym. The building was a masterpiece of organic architecture, a grand hall whose walls were the living wood of the tree, adorned with flowing silks and glowing crystals. The entrance was a massive, arched opening, flanked by 2 stone statues of a Sylveon and a Spritzy. He could feel the natural energy of the world flowing strongly here, drawn in by the ancient tree as if it were the planet's very lung. And laid over that pure, vibrant energy was the ugly, greasy stain of the corruption. It was like finding a smear of industrial sludge on a priceless painting. As he approached, he saw a woman standing just inside the entrance, looking out at the rain. She was slender and elegant, with an almost doll-like beauty. Her hair was a vibrant shade of pink, styled in 2 large, distinctive puffs that framed a face with large, expressive green eyes. She wore a frilly, gothic Lolita-style dress of black and pink, a stark but somehow fitting contrast to the natural world around her. She held a sketchbook in one hand and a charcoal pencil in the other, but she was not drawing. She was simply watching the mist, her expression one of thoughtful contemplation. Naruto felt her aura as he drew near. It was bright, creative, and whimsical, like a playful breeze through a field of flowers. But there was a surprising steeliness to it, a core of unshakable conviction. This was no fragile doll. As he stepped under the shelter of the gym's entrance, her eyes shifted from the rain to him. And they widened. But it was not with fear or surprise. It was with a spark of pure, unadulterated fascination. Her artist's gaze swept over him, taking in every detail. The interlocking plates of his Durant shell armor, the shifting patterns etched into their surface, the way the deep green complemented his sun-blonde hair. The quiet, immense power that radiated from him like heat from a forge. Incredible, she breathed, her voice a soft, lilting melody. It is as if a character from nay of the old tales has stepped out of the pages and into my world. The composition, the textures, the untamed grace. You are a living work of art. Naruto stopped a few feet from her, his own senses analyzing her in turn. He could feel no deceit in her, only a genuine, almost overwhelming aesthetic appreciation. He gave a slight, formal inclination of his head. I am not here as art, he said, his voice a calm, low baritone that seemed to resonate in the living wood of the gym. I am here on a quest. I am tracking a wound. Valerie's head tilted, her pink hair bobbing. A wound, she repeated, the word sounding like a line from a poem on her lips. The world is full of them, Sir Knight. Wounds of the heart, wounds of time. Which one do you seek to mend? A wound in the world's life force, Naruto stated, his gaze unwavering. He gestured vaguely toward the interior of the gym. I have followed its trail here, to this tree. Its energy is tainted, scarred by something artificial and violent. The playful light in Valerie's eyes sharpened into keen intelligence. She closed her sketchbook, her full attention now on him. So, you felt it too. I thought I was imagining it. A certain coarseness in the air, like a brutal stitch on a silk gown. It has been faint, but persistent, for several weeks now. It dulls the inspiration. She took a step closer, her curiosity overriding any sense of caution. You speak of the world's life force as if you are intimately acquainted with it. Who are you? I am Naruto Uzumaki. I serve the Fey Queen, he answered simply. The name would mean nothing to her, but the title, he hoped, would convey the gravity of his purpose. Valerie's eyes lit up with recognition, not of a political entity, but of a concept. The Fey, she whispered, a genuine smile gracing her lips. Of course, it all makes sense now. The fairy types of my gym have been agitated for weeks, their senses frayed by that coarseness. I should have known it was a matter for their own kind. Her gaze turned appreciative, and she sent her champion. She chose well. Before Naruto could respond, a subtle shift in the air caught his attention. It was a faint, almost undetectable distortion in the local energy field. The kind of signature left by cloaking technology. His eyes narrowed, his body shifting from a state of relaxed readiness to one of coiled tension in less than a heartbeat. 3 men, dressed in drab gray uniforms that were an insult to the vibrant city, were materializing from thin air at the edges of the gym's entrance, flanking them. They held strange, pronged devices in their hands, all aimed directly at him. Valerie gasped, taking an involuntary step back, not in fear for herself, but in sudden understanding. You, she exclaimed, her voice losing its poetic lilt and gaining a sharp, angry edge. The men from Ether Corporation. I told you I would not allow you to conduct your vulgar experiments on this sacred tree. The man in the center, clearly the leader, ignored her completely. His eyes, cold and analytical, were locked on Naruto. A small, high-tech scanner was built into the side of his head, and a red light was blinking furiously. Subject is confirmed, the man said, his voice a flat, robotic monotone. Massive, and classified energy signature. Off the known scale. Primary objective. Secure the asset. Non-lethal force authorized. Lethal force permitted if asset resists. Quote, Naruto's expression did not change, but a dangerous light entered his blue eyes. Asset. They saw him not as a person, but as a resource to be claimed. He had seen this cold, grasping mentality in the vision from the rift. I would advise against this course of action, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a low, warning growl. The very air around him seemed to grow heavy, charged with a palpable pressure. The ether agent sneered. We are not asking. He raised his hand. Fire. The 3 devices hummed and discharged crackling nets of pure, golden energy. They were designed to ensnare Pokémon, to disrupt their connection to their own energy and paralyze them. Against a normal human, they would have been instantly fatal. Naruto did not dodge. He did not retreat. He simply acted. The world seemed to slow down from Valerie's perspective. As the nets flew through the air, Naruto moved. It was not the frantic scramble of a man trying to escape, but a Movement of impossible grace and terrifying efficiency. He raised his left hand, his palm open towards the incoming projectiles. Disperse, he commanded, not shouting, but speaking with a tone of absolute authority. A wave of invisible force, a pulse of raw, controlled aura, erupted from his palm. The energy nets, marvels of human technology, simply came apart. They dissolved into harmless, tearing motes of light that rained down on the cobblestones like dust. The three agents stared, their professional composure shattered for a fraction of a second. That was all Naruto needed. He moved forward, covering the 20 feet between them in what seemed like a single, flowing step. He was a phantom, a green armored blur. He reached the agent on the left first. He didn't punch or kick. He MPLY tapped 2 fingers against the man's throat and one against his chest, just over his heart. The agent's eyes rolled back into his head, and he crumpled to the ground, unconscious but unharmed. Naruto's knowledge of aura allowed him to see the flow of energy in a body. He had simply disrupted it, temporarily shutting the man's system down. The agent on the right tried to bring his weapon up to use as a club. Naruto's hand shot out and gripped the man's wrist. The agent grunted in pain, feeling a surge of what felt like icy fire shoot up his arm, numbing it completely. Naruto had injected a tiny, precise amount of his own aura into the man's nervous system. The agent dropped his weapon and stumbled back, his arm hanging uselessly at his side. The leader, recovering his composure, pulled a more conventional sidearm. A pistol that fired concentrated beams of plasma. As he raised it, Naruto was already there. He brought the butt of his palm up in a short, sharp strike under the man's chin. It was not a blow meant to break bone, but to rattle the brain within the skull. The agent's head snapped back, and he collapsed in a heap on top of his subordinate. The entire engagement had lasted less than 3 seconds. Silence descended, broken only by the soft, steady patter of the rain. Naruto stood over the 3 unconscious forms, his posture unchanged, his breathing even. There was no sign of exertion, no flush of victory. He simply looked down at them with a cold, analytical disappointment, as if they were a minor, predictable obstacle that had been cleared from his path. He turned to face Valerie. Her sketchbook and pencil lay forgotten on the ground. Her mouth was slightly agape, and her wide green eyes were shining with an emotion he couldn't quite place. It was not fear. It was a profound, overwhelming awe. She was an artist who had just witnessed a master create a fleeting, violent, and breathtakingly beautiful masterpiece. You didn't even draw your weapon," she whispered, her gaze flicking to the staff on his back and then back to him. "It was not necessary," Naruto replied, his tone even. "They were clumsy, unbalanced. All of their power is in their toys. They have none of their own." He knelt beside the lead agent, his movements fluid and precise. He began to search the man's pockets, his touch light and practiced. "You called them Ether Corporation. This is the name I saw in my vision. Tell me of them." Valerie seemed to shake herself out of her reverie. She picked up her sketchbook, her hands not quite steady. "They are a technology company from the Hoenn region. Though they have expanded rapidly, they present a clean image. Pioneers of new energy sources, Pokémon conservation, but it is a false face. A poorly designed costume. They came to me a month ago. They wanted to place their machines on the Great Tree, to study its unique energy emissions. They spoke of power and progress, but their eyes were full of greed. Their aura, as you would call it, was ugly. I refused them." Naruto found what he was looking for, a small, flat data device. He stood, examining it for a moment before tucking it securely into a pouch on his belt. "You were wise to do so. Their studies are what wounded my world. They are not scientists. They are thieves, drilling into the walls of a house that is not their own." His piercing blue eyes met her fascinated green ones. The intensity of his gaze was like a physical touch. He saw in her not just a source of information, but a spirit that resonated with his own purpose. She loved and protected this place, this tree. She understood the sanctity of nature. In this loud, chaotic world, he had stumbled upon a kindred soul. "They will return," he stated. "And they will be more prepared. My presence here is no longer a secret to them." Valerie took a step forward, her earlier awe now solidifying into a fierce resolve. The steel in her aura shone brightly. "Then they will find us both waiting for them," she declared, her voice ringing with a newfound strength. "You are a knight from a fairy tale, on a quest to save your kingdom. And this city, this tree, is now under my protection and yours. I may not fight with the grace you do, Sir Naruto, but I know the secrets of this land. I know its people, its history. My art is not just in fabric and thread, but in knowledge. I will be your guide in this strange, new world." A rare, small smile touched Naruto's lips. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and revealing a glimpse of the immense charisma he held in reserve. "I accept your offer, Valerie. It would seem my quest has found its first ally." The rain continued to fall around them, washing the cobblestones clean, but inside the grand, living entrance of the Lavere gym, a powerful and unexpected alliance had just been forged, a bond created from a shared respect for the ancient world and a mutual defiance against those who would seek to plunder it. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Volcano's Heartbeat. The whimsical, rain-slicked stones of Lavere City felt a world away. Naruto stood with Valerie in the quiet, inner sanctum of the gym, a circular chamber open to the misty sky where the great tree's branches formed a living, breathing cathedral ceiling. The air was cool and smelled of petrichor and ancient wood. Before them, projected from a small, sleek device Valerie had produced, a holographic map of the world shimmered, a three-dimensional model of blues, greens, and browns. Naruto held the data slate he had taken from the ether agent. With Valerie's help, he had bypassed its rudimentary security in minutes. His innate ability to sense and manipulate energy, even the complex electronic pathways of human technology, made him a natural locksmith for such devices. The slate's contents were a web of corporate logistics, shipping manifests, and heavily encrypted project files. Most of it was meaningless jargon, but one thread stood out, a series of massive, anomalous power transfers routed to a geothermal energy plant located in the Hoenn region. The destination was designated simply as Project Chimera. "Mount Chimney," Valerie said, her finger tracing a path on the holographic globe from Kalos, across a vast ocean, to a mountainous island region. "It is a place of primal fire and earth. An active volcano. A fitting location for a company that seeks to bleed the world of its power." She looked at him, her green eyes serious. "Hoenn is a very different land from Kalos, Naruto. It is wilder, more ancient. Its people are passionate, deeply connected to the land and its history. They can be tempestuous. Passion is the fire of life," Naruto responded, his gaze fixed on the glowing red dot that marked the ether facility. "It is preferable to the cold, sterile ambition I have sensed from this corporation." He had felt the truth of her words in the data slate. The energy readings from the plant were erratic, spiking and plummeting with a chaotic rhythm. Ether Corp wasn't just drawing power from the volcano, they were agitating it, disrupting the deep, steady rhythm of the earth for their own selfish gains. It was a violation he could feel in his bones, a deep, magmatic groan of protest that echoed across the world to his senses. "They have a private airfield," he noted, pointing to a set of coordinates on the slate. "Small, discreet, for cargo and personnel." "Then that is where you must go," Valerie said, a hint of reluctance in her voice. Their time together had been brief, but a bond had formed, a mutual respect between two guardians of different worlds. "I will continue my own research here. I have friends in the fashion world, in historical societies. Ether has roots, and I will find them. A weed is best killed by pulling it up from its source." Naruto nodded, deactivating the data slate and securing it. He turned to face her fully. "Your help has been invaluable, Valerie. You have given my quest a direction. You have given my city a protector," she countered, a soft smile on her lips. "And my art, a new inspiration." She reached out, not to touch him, but to adjust the collar of his Levani silk tunic, a small, almost intimate gesture. "Be careful, Sir Knight. The fires of Hoenn can burn brighter than any you have known." "Fire is an element of nature," he said, his voice calm and certain. "I am in harmony with nature. It will not harm me." Their parting was not one of long goodbyes. It was a simple, shared look of understanding. He, the warrior, would go to the front lines. She, the artist and scholar, would unravel the enemy's secrets from the shadows. With a final nod, Naruto turned and walked from the gym, melting back into the misty streets of Lavere, a silent, green-armored phantom on his way to war. The transition was a brutal, physical shock. One moment he was in the cool, sterile environment of a commercial transport plane, a necessary concession to crossing the vast ocean. A journey he had undertaken with stoic patience, and the next he was stepping onto the tarmac of a small, dusty airstrip on the outskirts of Laveridge town. The heat hit him like a physical blow. It was not the gentle warmth of a hearth fire but a thick, oppressive blanket of superheated air that shimmered in visible waves above the dark, volcanic soil. The sun was a merciless, white-hot tyrant in a sky of bleached, cloudless blue. Within seconds, a sheen of sweat coated his skin. The air was thick with the sharp, acrid tang of sulfur, a constant, throat-scratching reminder of the immense, lumbering power that dominated the landscape. And beneath the sulfur was the scent of baked earth and the faint, gritty taste of airborne ash that coated his tongue. The world here was not soft and whimsical. It was a land of harsh, jagged edges. The ground was not covered in soft moss but in black, volcanic rock and sparse, hardy grasses that clung stubbornly to life. The trees were stunted, twisted things, their bark scarred, their leaves a dull, dusty green. And towering over everything, a constant, brooding presence on the horizon, was Mount Chimney. It was a colossal, angry-looking mountain, its peak shrouded in a perpetual plume of dark smoke and steam that stained the sky a dirty brown. It was not the silent, majestic mountain of a postcard, it was a living, breathing, groaning beast. Naruto could feel its heartbeat, a deep, slow, and profoundly agitated thrum that vibrated up through the soles of his boots. The mountain was in pain. The ether facility was a cancer on its flank, its geothermal drills sinking into the volcano's flesh like parasitic needles, draining its lifeblood and poisoning it with their chaotic, artificial energies. He saw no reason to linger in the small, sleepy town. His objective was clear. He adjusted the staff on his back, his gaze fixed on the plume of smoke, and began the ascent. The path up Mount Chimney was treacherous, a winding trail of loose scree and sharp, obsidian-like rock. The heat intensified with every step, the air growing thinner and more choked with sulfurous fumes. For a normal human, the journey would have been an arduous, exhausting ordeal. For Naruto, it was a pilgrimage into the heart of a wounded god. He moved with an unnerving, steady pace, his Fey-crafted boots finding purchase where there should have been none. He was an island of calm in the oppressive environment, his breathing deep and even, his body perfectly acclimated to the strain. He ignored the marked path, taking a more direct, perilous route up the mountainside. His senses guiding him toward the epicenter of the mountain's distress. As he climbed, he saw the signs of the volcano's agitation everywhere. He passed a herd of Numel, their camel-like bodies trembling. The small volcanoes on their backs sputtering nervously. They should have been placid, but their collective aura was a knot of fear and confusion. Further up, he saw deep scorch marks on the rock walls. Far larger and more intense than any normal Pokémon could produce, the result of agitated Torkoal and Magcargo venting their stress in uncontrolled bursts of fire. The earth itself was restless, subject to frequent, low-grade tremors that sent showers of pebbles skittering down the slopes. He was a third of the way up the mountain, navigating a narrow ledge, when he felt a new presence. It was a human aura, but one unlike any he had sensed before. It was a roaring, uncontrolled bonfire of passion, impatience, and fierce, protective anger. It was a pinpoint of intense heat in the already scorching landscape, and it was moving towards him at a reckless speed. Naruto paused, turning his body to face the direction of the approaching energy. He stood perfectly still on the narrow ledge, the wind whipping his blonde hair, his hand resting lightly on the pommel of his staff. He was a silent, waiting predator. A figure burst around a corner of the rock face, skidding to a halt in a shower of gravel. It was a young woman, perhaps a year or two younger than him, with a wild, untamed energy that seemed to perfectly match the volatile mountain. Her hair was a fiery crimson, tied back in a spiky, gravity-defying style. She wore a simple, practical outfit of a black crop top and gray shorts, designed for mobility and to combat the oppressive heat. Her eyes, a sharp, intelligent amber, were blazing with fury. She was panting, not from exertion, but from sheer adrenaline. Her gaze locked onto Naruto, taking in his strange armor, his powerful build, and the calm, otherworldly aura that surrounded him. And she jumped to the most obvious, and entirely wrong, conclusion. "You," she yelled, her voice a raw, powerful shout that echoed across the rocks. I knew it. The tremors. The scared Pokémon. It had to be some outsider causing all this trouble. "Who the hell are you? And what do you think you're doing to my mountain?" Naruto's expression remained placid, his blue eyes analytical. He could feel the raw, untempered power radiating from her. She was strong, her spirit a blazing inferno. But her fire lacked control. It was a wildfire, not a focused flame. He recognized the source of her anger. It was the fierce, territorial protectiveness of a guardian. A guardian who had misidentified the threat. "My name is Naruto," he said, his voice calm and even. A stark contrast to her fiery outburst. "And I am not your enemy. I have come to help this mountain, not to harm it." The girl let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Help it? By trespassing in restricted areas dressed like you're ready for a war? I'm Flannery, the gym leader of Laveridge Town. This mountain is under my protection, and you, pal, look like the problem, not the solution. I've been chasing down reports of a weird energy signature all morning, and guess what? It led me straight to you." "Your senses are correct," Naruto replied coolly. "You detected my energy, but you have mistaken the scent of the physician for the disease itself. The sickness you feel in this mountain comes from higher up the slope. From the facility that bleeds it dry." Flannery's eyes narrowed, her fists clenching. She wasn't listening to his words. She was reacting to his presence, to the sheer, overwhelming power he radiated. In her black and white world of passion and battle, such power, in the wrong hands, was a threat that needed to be met head-on. There was no room for negotiation or doubt. "I've had enough of your weird, cryptic talk," she snapped, reaching for a Pokeball on her belt. "Actions speak louder than words. You want to prove you're not a threat? Then prove it against me. If you're a friend to this mountain, you wouldn't be afraid to face its chosen protector." Naruto let out a quiet, almost imperceptible sigh. It was not one of weariness, but of resignation. He had hoped for a more rational encounter, but he understood her mindset. She was a creature of fire and instinct. To her, a battle was not just a conflict, it was a conversation, a way of testing the spirit and intentions of another. To refuse would be an admission of guilt or weakness in her eyes. "Very well, Gym Leader Flannery," he said, his hand dropping from his staff. He made no move to draw a weapon or summon a creature. He simply widened his stance slightly, settling into a state of perfect, relaxed balance on the narrow ledge. "If a demonstration is what you require, then a demonstration you shall receive. But I warn you, I will not harm your partner. I will merely end the conflict." His confidence seemed to inflame her even more. "Big words. Let's see if you can back them up. Go, Torkoal." She threw the Pokeball. It burst open in a flash of red light, and a large, tortoise-like Pokémon materialized on the path. Its shell was a dark, charcoal gray, pitted and scarred like volcanic rock. Smoke billowed from the nostrils on its snout and from the holes along the top of its shell. Its eyes, small and ancient, glowed with a dull red light. The Torkoal let out a low, guttural roar, a sound like grinding stone, and the very air around it seemed to shimmer with intense heat. The creature was a living furnace, a miniature volcano in its own right, and Naruto could feel a deep, loyal bond between it and its trainer. "Torkoal, use flamethrower," Flannery commanded, pointing a finger at Naruto. The Torkoal's neck extended, and it opened its mouth. With a deafening roar, it unleashed a massive, concentrated torrent of brilliant orange and red fire. The blast was wide enough to engulf the entire ledge, a searing wave of incandescent plasma that could melt solid rock. Flannery smirked, expecting the strangely armored man to leap from the ledge or be incinerated where he stood. He did neither. As the wall of fire raced towards him, Naruto moved with a speed that defied belief. He took one step forward, into the path of the attack. He did not raise a shield or a barrier. Instead, he raised his hickory staff. Holding it horizontally in a two-handed grip, he began to spin it. He spun the staff so fast it became a blur, a near-invisible disk of motion. He was not blocking the fire. He was manipulating the air around him, creating a powerful, localized vortex. The massive flamethrower slammed into the vortex, and instead of exploding on impact, it was caught. The torrent of fire was captured by the swirling winds, its linear path twisted into a spiral. With a powerful, fluid motion, Naruto angled the spinning staff upwards. The vortex, now a contained cyclone of pure fire, was redirected. It shot harmlessly into the sky above them, a brilliant, roaring pillar of flame that dissipated into the hazy blue. The attack was over. The ledge was unscorched. Naruto stood exactly where he had been. The staff now resting on his shoulders, his expression as calm and unruffled as if he'd just deflected a gentle breeze. Flannery's jaw dropped. Her smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. What? How did you do that? The Torkoal, equally confused by its attack's complete failure, stamped its foot and let out an angry huff of smoke. I told you, Naruto said, his voice level. I am in harmony with nature. Fire, air, earth, water, they are my allies, not my enemies. Flannery's shock quickly hardened back into furious determination. This wasn't just a trespasser anymore. This was a challenger, someone with a power she had never seen before. Her pride as a gym leader was on the line. Don't get cocky. That was just a warm-up. Torkoal, use smokescreen. Let's see how you handle what you can't see. The Torkoal drew in a deep breath and exhaled a thick, choking cloud of black smoke from the holes in its shell. In seconds, the entire area was enveloped in an impenetrable darkness. A disorienting soup of soot and ash that blinded the eyes and clogged the lungs. Now, iron defense, then charge. Flannery yelled into the smoke. She couldn't see, but she trusted her Pokemon's instincts. Inside the cloud, Naruto did not cough or stumble. The smoke was thick, but to his senses, it was irrelevant. He closed his eyes. Vision was a crutch. He could feel the solid form of the Torkoal as it braced itself, its energy signature hardening as its defensive capabilities increased. He could feel the subtle shifts in the air currents as it began to move. Its heavy feet pounding against the rock. He could feel the blazing core of heat within its shell, the locus of its power. He saw not with his eyes, but with his aura. And in that realm of pure energy, the Torkoal was a shining beacon in the dark. The Pokémon charged, a 400-pound battering ram of superheated shell and muscle, aimed directly at the spot where Naruto had been standing. Naruto did not move until the last possible fraction of a second. Just as the Torkoal was about to smash into him, he flowed. He sidestepped the charge with an impossibly small, fluid movement. He was like a leaf in the wind, simply not there when the force arrived. As the massive Pokémon thundered past him, he reached out with his staff. He didn't strike a heavy blow. He simply tapped it, with pinpoint precision, against two of the larger holes on the sides of Torkoal's shell. He channeled a tiny, focused burst of his own aura through the staff. It was not a destructive energy, but a cold one. He burst of cold rapidly cooled the rock around the vents, causing a thin layer of solidified dust and minerals to instantly form, blocking them. The Torkoal, having missed its target, stumbled to a halt at the end of the ledge. It turned, preparing for another attack, but something was wrong. It grunted, a confused, uncomfortable sound. The internal pressure from its furnace-like body, which ally vented through the holes in its shell, was now partially blocked. The heat was building up inside it, creating an uncomfortable back pressure. It wasn't injured, but it was effectively gagged, its ability to vent excess heat and smoke for attacks severely hampered. What's wrong, Torkoal? Flannery cried out, her voice laced with concern as the smokescreen began to dissipate in the mountain wind. She saw her Pokémon standing there, looking confused and distressed, and Naruto standing calmly a few feet away, staff in hand. Your partner is unharmed, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the thinning smoke. I have merely restricted the flow of its internal energies. It can no longer safely use its fire attacks without overheating. Do you concede? Flannery stared, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. He hadn't landed a single powerful blow. He hadn't used a Pokémon of his own. He had simply dismantled her Torkoal's entire fighting style with two precise, ridiculously elegant moves. He had treated her ace Pokémon, a creature of immense power, like a machine with a couple of loose screws that needed tightening. It was the most comprehensive, and most insulting, defeat she had ever suffered. But beneath the sting of her pride, a new feeling was bubbling up. It was a grudging, electrifying sense of respect. He wasn't a brute, he was a master. He possessed a level of control and precision that she, with her wild, untamed style, could only dream of. He had proven his point without leaving a single scratch on her beloved Torkoal. How? She finally managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. What kind of power is that? It is called aura, Naruto explained, walking slowly towards her. He reached the distressed Torkoal and placed a hand gently on its hot, rocky shell. He sent a small pulse of energy into it, and the mineral plugs he had created instantly disintegrated into dust. The Torkoal let out a long, relieved hiss of steam, its internal pressure normalizing. It looked at Naruto, its ancient red eyes blinking, not with hostility, but with a newfound, curious respect. It is the life force of the world. I do not command it. I ask for its cooperation. He then walked past the Torkoal and stopped in front of Flannery. He was close enough now that she could feel the incredible, calm energy radiating from him, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the mountain. It was like standing next to a deep, cool well in the middle of a desert. His blue eyes held no judgment, no mockery, only a quiet, waiting intensity. He held out the data. Slate he had taken from the ether agent. This is why I am here, he said. The men who attacked me in Kalos carried this. It details the operations of the Ether Corporation. This facility on your mountain, Project Chimera, is their creation. They are the ones causing the tremors. They are the ones agitating the Pokémon. I did not come here to fight you, Gym Leader. I came here to fight them. Flannery took the slate, her hands trembling slightly. She stared at the device, then up at his face, then back at the device. The pieces were crashing together in her mind, the strange energy readings. The corporate helicopters she'd seen flying to and from the peak, the secretive nature of the facility that had claimed to be a simple, clean energy project. Her fiery, impulsive nature had led her to attack an ally, not an enemy. A hot flush of embarrassment and anger, this time directed at herself, rose in her cheeks, a color that rivaled her crimson hair. I'm an idiot, she muttered, clenching her fists. A hot-headed, reckless idiot. You are a protector, Naruto corrected her, his tone softening slightly. Your instincts were to defend your home. You merely aimed your fire at the wrong target. Now you know where the true threat lies. Flannery looked up at him, her amber eyes filled with a complex storm of emotions, shame, anger, and a burning, intense curiosity. He was nothing like anyone she had ever met. He was powerful, but gentle, confident, but not arrogant, and he had treated her with a strange, formal respect even while effortlessly defeating her. A slow grin spread across her face, a fiery, genuine smile that transformed her entire expression. The shame was burned away, replaced by a familiar, exhilarating blaze of determination. All right, mister, or a man, she said, her voice regaining its strength and energy. You're strong, stupidly, ridiculously strong, and you respect Pokémon. I can get behind that. She tossed the data slate back to him. You want to take on Ether. Fine, but you're not doing it alone. Nobody messes with my mountain and gets away with it. Nobody. She recalled her Torkoal in a flash of red light and clipped the Pokeball back to her belt. She then jabbed a thumb up towards the smoking peak. The facility is up there, near the caldera. Security is tight, sensors, trained guards, and their own team of tough Pokémon. You can't just walk in the front door. I had no intention of using the door, Naruto replied. Flannery's grin widened. Good. I like your style. She cracked her knuckles, the sound sharp in the sulphurous air. Why? I've got the weird magic and the silent, cool guy thing down. I've got local knowledge and a team that can melt steel. So, what's the plan, Naruto? He looked up at the peak, at the plume of smoke th. It represented the mountain's pain and the corruption of the Ether Corporation. Then he looked at the fiery, impulsive, but fiercely loyal gym leader beside him. Valerie had been an ally of the mind, a strategist and scholar. This woman was an ally of the spirit, a warrior of pure, untamed fire. His quest was gathering not just followers, but forces of nature in their own right. The plan, he said, a hint of a smile touching his own lips, is to remind them what happens when you anger a volcano. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. a star in the limelight. The aftermath of their assault on the Ether F. Facility was a symphony of controlled chaos, and Flannery was its conductor. She stood amidst the wreckage of the plant's primary control room, her face smudged with soot, her crimson hair dusted with ash, and a grin of pure, unadulterated exhilaration plastered across her face. Vents hissed with released pressure, emergency klaxons blared in a rhythmic, panicked beat, and the entire structure groaned like a dying beast. They hadn't destroyed the plant. Naruto had been adamant about that. Instead, they had performed what he called aggressive, surgical sabotage. With Flannery's team of fire types providing a glorious, overwhelming distraction, melting secondary conduits and turning security drones to molten slag, Naruto had moved through the facility's core like a ghost. He hadn't broken machines, he had communed with them, using his aura to overload their circuits, corrupt their data streams, and turn their own safety protocols against them. The result was a complete, non-lethal shutdown and a data core ripe for the picking. "I've gotta hand it to you, or a man," Flannery said, wiping a grimy hand across her forehead as she watched Naruto calmly download the facility's entire encrypted network onto the Ether data slate. "I was expecting a lot more explosions. But this is art. You didn't just break their toy, you made it take itself apart. It's beautiful." "Destruction is inefficient," Naruto replied. His eyes closed as he mentally navigated the digital labyrinth, his fingers resting lightly on the slate. The flow of data was just another form of energy, and he could sense its currents, its locks, and its keys. "We needed information, not rubble. And the mountain has suffered enough violence." He went still for a moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then his eyes snapped open. "I have it." He showed the slate to Flannery. On its screen was a complex web of financial transactions and encrypted communiques. The Mount Chimney operation, Project Chimera, was just one small node. The true nexus of power, the heart that pumped the money and the orders, was not in Hoenn. It was back in Kalos. Lysandre. Flannery read the name aloud from a decrypted file. Owner of Lysandre Labs, a tech mogul, famous philanthropist, and the primary, secret shareholder in Ether's dimensional research division. The man is practically a celebrity in Kalos. He is attending a function tonight, Naruto added, his finger highlighting a calendar entry. The Lumiose Elite Charity Gala. At the Lumiose Museum of Fine Art. He looked up from the slate, his blue eyes holding a new, cold focus. The head of the serpent. Flannery let out a low whistle. From a volcano to a high society party. You sure know how to pick your battlefields. She crossed her arms, her fiery energy already protesting the very idea. I'm not exactly the gala type. I'd probably end up setting the curtains on fire if someone looked at me wrong. Your battle is here, Naruto affirmed, his tone leaving no room for argument. The shutdown of this facility will draw attention from the highest levels of Ether. You must manage the fallout, control the narrative. Tell the Hoenn League it was a dangerous, unstable geothermal plant that you, the local gym leader, were forced to neutralize to prevent a catastrophe. You will be a hero, and it will give you the political cover to investigate Ether's other operations in this region. She looked from the chaos around them to his calm, determined face. He was right. He was the scalpel, she was the hammer. And this part of the fight required a scalpel's precision. All right, she conceded, a spark of respect in her amber eyes. You go play dress up with the rich folks. I'll handle the cleanup and start kicking down doors here in Hoenn. She stuck out her hand. A gesture that was both a formal agreement and a genuine sign of camaraderie. Give 'em hell, Naruto. He took her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused and warm. The fire has been lit, Flannery. I will simply fan the flames. Lumiose City was even more of an assault on the senses the second time. After the raw, primal heat of Mount Chimney, the city's artificiality felt suffocating. Naruto stood in a high-end boutique, a place that smelled of treated leather and cloying perfume, feeling more out of his element than he had when facing down a torrent of dragon fire. The very concept of the place was alien, paying exorbitant sums for pieces of fabric that offered no protection, no utility, only status. No, 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 the tiny, impeccably dressed man fussing over him chirped, his hands fluttering like agitated butterfree. The shoulders are all wrong. Your physique, It is a challenge. You are built like a statue from the old legends, but you wish to wear the clothes of a modern mortal. It is a paradox. Naruto stood perfectly still, enduring the man's ministrations with the same stoic patience he would grant a nervous Pokémon. He was currently wearing a ridiculously expensive suit jacket that felt like a cage, its fabric tight and restrictive across his back and shoulders, a mockery of the freedom of movement his Fey armor afforded him. I require something simple, Naruto stated for the third time, his voice a low rumble in the hushed, carpeted store. Dark, unobtrusive, something that will allow me to blend in. The tailor let out a theatrical gasp. Blend in, monsieur. A man with a presence like yours could not blend in if he were wrapped in camouflage and hidden in a bush. Your aura, it screams. We must not fight it, we must complement it. After another hour of this torture, they finally reached a compromise. It was a suit of the deepest charcoal gray, tailored to perfection from a material that was surprisingly light and allowed for a decent range of motion. It was simple, unadorned, and when paired with a crisp white shirt and a plain black tie, it achieved a state of severe, minimalist elegance. The tailor was ecstatic, claiming it was his magnum opus. Naruto simply felt confined. He had traded his second skin, the armor that was a part of his very being, for a restrictive, meaningless costume. But it was a necessity. To enter this new battlefield, he had to wear its uniform. As he walked towards the Lumio's museum, the setting sun painting the clouds in shades of orange and violet, he felt the profound wrongness of his attire. His armor was a part of the natural world, a collection of shed carapaces and woven silks, imbued with the life force of the realm. This suit was a dead thing, a construct of chemicals and threads, devoid of spirit. It made him feel naked, exposed. For the first time, he felt like an outsider not just because of his power, but because of his very appearance. The gala was in full swing when he arrived. The grand hall of the museum was a sea of glittering jewels, rustling silk, and the forced, brittle laughter of the Kalos elite. The air was thick with the competing scents of 100 different perfumes. The delicate aroma of champagne, and the underlying, metallic tang of ambition. Flashing lights from photographers, cameras strobed near the entrance, creating a disorienting, artificial lightning storm. The polite murmur of the crowd was a high-frequency buzz that grated on his senses. This was a different kind of wilderness, he realized. A social jungle, where the predators hid their teeth behind polite smiles and the battles were fought with whispered words and calculated glances. His aura sense, which had been a clear and precise tool in the natural world, was almost useless here. The emotions were a chaotic, muddy torrent of superficial charm, veiled envy, and rapacious greed, all layered over a bedrock of profound, soul-crushing boredom. He bypassed the main entrance, using a service corridor he had identified earlier. He had no invitation, and he had no desire for the scrutiny of the entrance line. He emerged from a doorway behind a large, potted fern, stepping into the main hall unnoticed. A waiter drone floated by, and he took a glass of champagne from its tray, not to drink, but to hold as a prop. He needed to be a gray man, a part of the background. He found a position in the shadow of a large, abstract sculpture, a place where he could observe the room without being the center of attention. His eyes scanned the crowd, his mind a quiet, analytical engine. He was not looking for faces. He was looking for power. He could see the intricate web of social dynamics, the subtle shifts in posture as a person of higher status approached, the way certain individuals acted as gravitational centers, pulling others into their orbit. And there, near the center of it all, was Lysandre. He was a tall man with a striking mane of fiery orange hair, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit. He was charismatic, his laughter loud and easy, his gestures grand and inclusive. But his aura, it was a black hole. It was a vortex of narcissistic pride and a chillingly profound contempt for the world he so charmingly navigated. He was a predator hiding in plain sight, and the fawning creatures around him were utterly oblivious to the danger. Naruto watched, patient and still. He would wait for his moment. He needed to get close to the man, to place a tracer, a tiny, invisible mote of his own aura, on him. It would allow him to track the man's movements, to listen in on his private conversations, to find the true heart of his rotten enterprise. He was so focused on his target that he almost missed the shift in the room's energy. It was as if the Higher social gravity of the hull had suddenly tilted on its axis. The buzzing chatter dipped for a moment, and all heads turned towards the grand entrance. She had arrived. Even from across the room, she was radiant. Diantha, the champion of the Kalos region and a world-famous movie star, was a vision of impossible grace. She wore a stunning, floor-length gown of shimmering silver that seemed to be woven from moonlight itself. Diamonds glittered at her throat and in her ears, but they were dull things compared to the light in her violet eyes. Her dark, flowing hair was styled elegantly, and a gentle, practiced smile was fixed on her face as she greeted the fawning dignitaries and photographers. Naruto felt her aura, and it was the most complex he had ever sensed in a human. On the surface, it was brilliant, a dazzling supernova of power, charisma, and grace. It was the aura of a champion, a being at the pinnacle of her craft. But beneath that blindingly bright surface, there was a deep, hidden current of profound weariness. It was the aura of a woman trapped in a cage of her own making, a star that was slowly being consumed by its own light. It was, in its own way, a cry for help. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a fraction of a second, the universe seemed to hold its breath. In a room full of people staring at her with adoration, with greed, with envy, his gaze was different. It was not the look of a fan or a suitor. It was a gaze of startling, piercing clarity. It was analytical, direct, and held a depth that seemed to see past the gown, past the fame, past the title of champion, and straight into the weary soul beneath. It was a look that offered neither judgment nor worship, only recognition. Diantha's professional smile faltered for a heartbeat, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing her features. She had never seen him before, yet there was something unnervingly familiar in the way he looked at her. Intrigued, she gracefully disengaged from the Minister of Culture, her path subtly, but deliberately, altering to take her in Naruto's direction. He watched her approach, a silver ship sailing through a sea of fawning admirers. She moved with the poise of a queen, yet he could see the subtle tension in her shoulders, the practiced, almost robotic nature of her smiles and nods. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said, her voice a smooth, melodic alto as she stopped before him. It was the voice of 1,000 movie screens, perfectly modulated and effortlessly charming. "I'm Diantha, and you are someone who doesn't belong here," Naruto answered, his voice a low, quiet counterpoint to the room's noise. He did not offer a name, nor did he seem impressed by her presence. He simply met her gaze, his blue eyes as calm and deep as a mountain lake. His response was so unexpected, so utterly devoid of the usual fawning pleasantries, that Diantha was momentarily taken aback. A genuine, unscripted smile touched her lips. "Well, that makes two of us," she admitted in a conspiratorial whisper. "Though I have a bit more practice at pretending I do." Her eyes swept over him, her gaze as analytical as his had been. "You have a remarkable stillness about you. In a room this loud, it's a rare commodity. Are you a philosopher? A reclusive artist?" "I am a guardian," he replied simply. "From a quieter, older world." He was speaking the literal truth, but to her, it sounded like poetry, a beautiful metaphor. She was captivated. Here was a man who, in a place defined by status and reputation, refused to offer either. He was simply himself. "A quieter world sounds like a welcome reprieve," she said, her gaze flicking towards the cloying crowd. "Would you mind if I borrowed a moment of your peace? The air in here is rather thick." "As you wish," Naruto said, giving a slight nod of his head. Diantha led him through a set of glass doors onto a wide, secluded balcony. The cool night air was a welcome relief. The chaotic noise of the gala instantly muted, replaced by the distant, rhythmic hum of Lumio's city. Below them, the city was a breathtaking tapestry of light, a river of glowing traffic flowing around the illuminated base of the Prism Tower. "Thank you," Diantha said, leaning against the marble balustrade. The practiced smile fell away, replaced by a look of genuine, soul-deep exhaustion. "Sometimes I feel like I'll drown in there." "They do not see you," Naruto observed, standing a respectful distance away, his gaze on the city below. "They see a symbol, a reflection of their own desires for fame, power, or beauty." Diantha looked at him, surprised by his perception. "And what do you see, Mr. Guardian?" "I see a powerful warrior who has grown weary of a battle she fights every day, not in an arena, but in a hall of mirrors, he said. Turning to face her, his eyes were not filled with pity, but with a profound, quiet understanding. The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. No one had ever spoken to her with such brutal, compassionate honesty. He saw the truth of her, and he was not afraid to speak it. She felt a sudden, dizzying sense of vulnerability, quickly followed by a feeling of immense relief. "You are dangerously perceptive," she murmured, her voice losing its public-facing polish. "I've spent a decade building this persona, this symbol, as you call it. And you dismantle it in a sentence." Her gaze was intense, searching. "Who are you, truly?" Before Naruto could answer, his body went rigid. His head snapped to the side, his attention fixed on the grand, domed roof of the museum's main wing. Just to their left, his serene expression had vanished, replaced by one of cold, lethal focus. The air around him seemed to drop a few degrees. "What is it?" Diantha asked, alarmed by the sudden transformation. "There are people on the roof," he said, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "4 of them. Their energy is cloaked, suppressed. But I can feel them. They move with purpose, with malice." Diantha straightened up instantly, the champion's instincts overriding the weary actress. "The roof is off limits during events. The security patrols." "They are avoiding the patrols," Naruto interrupted. His eyes narrowed in concentration. "They are not moving randomly. They are targeting the ethereal collection in the East Wing. The centerpiece is the Starlit Tear. The museum's records say it is a large, flawless diamond, but the ancient texts I have studied describe it differently. They call it a Fey-touched crystal, a relic that resonates with dimensional energy." Diantha stared at him, her mind racing. The ethereal collection, Ether Corp, the Starlit Tear. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed. Lysandre was here, in the main hall, providing the perfect alibi while his agents performed a heist right under the nose of Kalos's entire social elite. "We have to alert security," she said, reaching for the small communication device in her purse. "No," Naruto countered, his voice firm. "They are professionals. By the time security mobilizes, they will be gone. The official channels are too slow, too predictable." He turned to her, his blue eyes blazing with a fierce, unwavering light. "But you and I are not. You know the layout of this museum better than anyone. You are its most prominent patron. You know the security blind spots, the patrol schedules, the secret passages." He was right. She did. She'd spent countless hours here, both in public and in private. She knew the building's secrets, its hidden arteries. "And you?" she asked, her heart beginning to pound with a mixture of fear and a long-dormant thrill. "What do you bring to this partnership?" A small, dangerous smile touched Naruto's lips. "I bring the quiet." A silent understanding passed between them. This was a test, a crucible. He was offering her a choice. Retreat into her safe, gilded cage, or step into his world of shadows and action. Diantha looked back at the glittering party, at the world of shallow smiles and empty conversations that had become her life. Then she looked at the strange, powerful man before her, who offered nothing but a dangerous, uncertain reality. The choice was not a choice at all. "Follow me," she said, her voice dropping to a determined whisper. "There's a private elevator for the curating staff behind the Impressionist wing. It has no cameras. It will take us to the upper maintenance levels." The champion of Kalos had made her move. She had stepped off the stage and into the fight. And as she led the mysterious guardian into the shadows of the museum, she felt more alive than she had in years. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Queen's Gambit. The cool, sterile air of the Lumiose Museum's maintenance corridors was a world away from the heat of the gala. The only sounds were the low hum of the building's climate control and the soft, urgent rhythm of their footsteps on the polished concrete floor. Diantha led the way, her silver gown now a hindrance. The train bunched up in one hand. She moved with a purpose that had been absent on the ballroom floor, the weary actress replaced entirely by the focused, strategic mind of the Kalos champion. Naruto followed a step behind, a silent, gray-clad shadow, his senses extended, painting a vivid, three-dimensional map of the building and its occupants in his mind. "They're in the main vault," he murmured, his voice a low vibration in the narrow hallway. "The Starlit Tear is no diamond. I can feel it from here. Its energy is sleeping." But it's the same frequency as the rift, only stable, dormant. It's a key. The vault is protected by a time lock, multiple pressure plates, and a psychic resonance scanner keyed to the museum director's brainwaves, Diantha whispered back, her brow furrowed. It's impossible to breach without raising every alarm in the city. They are not breaching it, Naruto said, a note of grim respect in his voice. They are phasing through it. A localized dimensional warp, crude, but effective. It's Ether Corp's signature. They reached a heavy steel door marked, East Wing Archives. Diantha produced a slim, elegant keycard from a hidden pocket in her gown and swiped it. The lock beeped softly and clicked open. This will bring us out behind the main exhibit hall. The vault is on the other side of the display floor. As she pushed the door open, Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly light but firm. Wait. He closed his eyes. The world dissolved into a sea of energy signatures. The frantic, chaotic static of the gala guests below. The calm, ordered pulses of the museum's security guards on their predictable patrols. And the four cold, sharp points of malice in the vault ahead. But there was another energy he was tracking. A single, almost imperceptible thread. A spider's silk line of communication. They have a fifth man. In the security hub, he said, his voice deadly calm. He's looping the sea. Amara feeds and suppressing the vault's internal sensors. He's the linchpin. If we storm the vault, he'll know instantly. He'll scrub the data, destroy the evidence, and they'll vanish before the League can even issue a warrant. Diantha's violet eyes hardened. The main security hub is on the ground floor, shielded and reinforced. It would take a siege to get in. We do not need to get in, Naruto corrected. We just need to cut the thread. He looked at her, his plan forming with crystalline clarity. You are the champion. Your presence here is unexpected, but not impossible to explain. You can create a diversion. A masterful one. Draw all eyes, all attention, to yourself. While you hold the stage, I will deal with the linchpin. Then, we take the vault. It was a plan built on insane levels of trust. He was asking her to place herself in the spotlight, to deliberately make herself the center of attention. The very thing she had just been trying to escape, while he moved unseen to perform an act of surgical sabotage. She didn't know his name, his history, or the true nature of his power. She only knew the unwavering confidence in his eyes and the profound sense of competence he radiated. What kind of diversion? She asked, the strategist in her taking over. Something only a champion could provide, he answered. Something memorable. A slow, calculating smile spread across Diantha's face. It was a smile full of theatrical flair and genuine, dangerous intent. I think I have just the thing. 5 minutes later, the grand hall of the Lumio's museum fell into a stunned silence. A single, powerful Pokemon's cry had echoed through the space, overriding the polite chatter and the clinking of glasses. On the grand staircase that dominated the hall, Diantha stood, a vision in silver. By her side, having materialized in a swirl of psychic energy, was her Gardevoir. The Pokémon was the epitome of elegance and power, a perfect partner for the Kalos champion. It stood tall and poised, its magenta eyes sweeping across the crowd with an intelligent, almost regal air. The crowd, initially startled, erupted into a wave of excited murmurs and applause. It was a rare treat to see the champion's ace Pokémon outside of a formal battle. Ladies and gentlemen, Diantha's voice, amplified by her Gardevoir's subtle psychic assistance, rang through the hall with effortless grace. Forgive my interruption, but it has come to my attention that the proceeds from tonight's charity have been exceptional. As a personal thank you for your generosity, I thought a small, impromptu demonstration of the bond between a trainer and her Pokémon was in order. Lysandre, standing near the foot of the stairs, watched with a predatory, appreciative smile. He saw this as nothing more than the champion indulging her ego. A welcome distraction that would only serve to cover his agent's tracks more effectively. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the upper level, Naruto moved. While every eye in the building was fixed on Diantha and her Gardevoir, he flowed through the corridors like water. The suit was restrictive, but his control over his own body was absolute. He moved in a state of near invisibility, his aura suppressed to the barest minimum, his footsteps utterly silent. He was a ghost in the machine. He reached the exterior wall of the main security hub. It was exactly as Diantha had described, reinforced steel, seamless and impenetrable. But he was not looking at the door. He was looking at the small, shielded conduit that ran into the wall, the hub's primary data line. He placed his palm flat against the cool metal of the conduit. He closed his eyes and reached out with his senses. He felt the river of data flowing within, camera feeds, sensor readings, communications. And amongst it all, he felt the intruder, the tiny, parasitic program that was looping the vault's security feed. It was clever, sophisticated, but it had a fatal flaw. It was artificial. It was a dead thing in a river of life. Naruto didn't try to hack it. He didn't need to understand its code. He simply introduced a single, focused drop of his own aura into the data stream. It was the equivalent of introducing a drop of pure, living water into a complex chemical engine. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The parasitic code, unable to process the living, organic energy, short-circuited. It tried to defend itself, to isolate the corruption, but in doing so, it tore itself apart. On the other side of the wall, the fifth agent saw his monitors ash with red error messages for a fraction of a second before the screens went completely dead. His connection to the vault team was severed. He was blind. He frantically began typing, trying to reboot the system, but it was too late. He was cut off. At the exact moment the connection was severed, Naruto felt it. He opened his eyes and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He turned and began moving back towards the exhibit hall, his speed even greater than before. The first part of the plan was complete. In the grand hall, Diantha's demonstration was reaching its zenith. Her Gardevoir W, as weaving a breathtaking ballet of psychic energy, creating shimmering illusions in the air, a flock of luminous fletchling that flew over the crowd, a shower of sparkling moondust that dissolved before it touched the ground. The audience was utterly spellbound, their phones held aloft, recording every second of the magical display. It was a masterclass in misdirection, a performance of a lifetime. Naruto slipped back into the archives corridor just as Diantha was taking a graceful bow to thunderous applause. She met his gaze across the distance, and he gave another slight nod. Phase 2 was a go. She subtly recalled her Gardevoir and, under the cover of the crowd's adulation, slipped away, meeting him back at the rendezvous point. Her chest was heaving slightly, her eyes bright with adrenaline. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice a breathless whisper. "Their eyes and ears are gone," he confirmed. "But they'll realize it soon. They'll either abort the mission or accelerate their efforts. We have to move now." They raced through the corridors, reaching the entrance to the Ethereal Collection's main gallery. The room was dark, the display cases unlit. In the center of the room stood the vault, a massive, circular door of polished chrome. 4 figures, dressed in black tactical gear, were gathered around it. A complex device was attached to the vault door, emitting a low, vibrational hum that made Naruto's teeth ache. The air around the vault was shimmering, distorting like a heat haze. They were seconds away from phasing the lock mechanism out of existence. One of the agents, a large, brutish man, turned as they entered, his hand immediately going for a weapon at his side. Contact. Were blown. There was no time for subtlety. Diantha's hand flew to her side, unclipping her last Pokeball. "Gardevoir, to me, Moonblast." Her ace Pokémon materialized beside her in a flash, already charging the attack. With a graceful gesture, she unleashed a sphere of brilliant, blindingly pink fairy-type energy. It shot across the room and exploded against the brutish agent, sending him flying backwards into a display case, which shattered with a musical crash. The other 3 agents reacted instantly. 2 of them drew strange, high-tech rifles, while the third, the team leader, grabbed the phasing device, trying to complete the process. Naruto moved. While the agent's attention was on the champion and her powerful Pokémon, he became a blur of motion. He crossed the room in the space of a single heartbeat, his path a straight, deadly line towards the 2 riflemen. He snatched one of the rifles from an agent's hands before the man could even register his presence, reversed it, and used the stock to strike the man at the base of his skull. The agent dropped without a sound. The second rifleman tried to aim at him, but Naruto was already inside his guard. He ducked under the barrel of the weapon, his hand shooting out to grip the man's throat. A single, precise application of pressure, and the man's body went limp, his weapon clattering to the floor. The team leader stared in disbelief, his hand frozen on the phasing device. He had planned for security guards, for police, even for a rogue Pokémon. He had not planned for a living weapon in a charcoal gray suit. He made a split-second decision, abandoning the device and pulling out a wicked-looking combat knife, lunging at Naruto. Naruto met the charge with an almost casual grace. He sidestepped the wild slash of the knife, his hand catching the agent's wrist, twisting it at an unnatural angle. The agent cried out in pain, dropping the knife. Naruto spun, using the man's own momentum to throw him headfirst into the solid wall next to the vault. The agent crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the abandoned phasing device and the sound of Diantha's hurried breathing. 4 highly trained, technologically advanced operatives had been neutralized in less than 10 seconds. Diantha looked from the downed agents to her Gardevoir, then to Naruto, who stood calmly amidst the chaos, adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket as if brushing off dust. She had seen countless battles in her life. She had faced the Elite Four, defended her title against legendary trainers. She had never, ever seen anything like that. It was not a fight, it was a cessation of hostilities, UTED with the terrifying efficiency of a force of nature. Naruto walked over to the phasing device and placed his hand on it. He sent a small pulse of aura into its core, and the machine sputtered, smoked, and died. He then turned his attention to the vault. The starlit tear is secure, he said, his voice as calm as if they had just been discussing the weather. He looked at Diantha, and for the first time, he offered her a genuine, approving smile. Your diversion was flawless, champion. You were as formidable in the ballroom as you were on the battlefield. Diantha felt a flush of pride that had nothing to do with the adulation of the crowd. It was the praise of a fellow warrior, an equal, and it meant more to her than any trophy. The distant sound of approaching sirens began to filter into the museum. The alarms had finally been tripped. Their time was up. You need to leave, Diantha said, her mind already working through the political and social fallout. I can handle this. I will tell them I was alerted to a silent alarm, that I cornered the thieves myself. They will believe me. And what of you? Naruto asked, his gaze direct. You have made a powerful enemy tonight. Lysandre will know you were involved. Let him, Diantha said, a dangerous fire in her violet eyes, the weariness completely burned away by the thrill of the fight. It's been a long time since I've had a worthy opponent off the battlefield. It's invigorating. Naruto gave a slight bow of his head, a gesture of profound respect. Then I will leave you to your stage. He turned to leave, but Diantha's voice stopped him. Wait, I still don't even know your name. He paused in the doorway, his form silhouetted against the dim light of the corridor. I am Naruto Uzumaki, he said, and my work in Kalos is not yet finished. We will meet again, Champion Diantha. He disappeared into the shadows just as the first armed security guards burst into the gallery, their faces a mixture of confusion and awe. The sight of their champion standing calmly amidst the wreckage, 4 unconscious criminals at her feet. Naruto did not stop moving until he was miles away, perched on the rooftop of a skyscraper overlooking the glittering expanse of Lumio's city. The wind was cold and clean at this height, a welcome balm after the stuffy, perfumed air of the gala. He had shed the suit jacket and tie, leaving them in a donation bin in a quiet alley. He felt freer already. He closed his eyes and reached out with his senses. He found the tiny, invisible mote of aura he had managed to place on Lysandre during a fleeting moment of distraction in the gala. The trace was active. It was a beacon in the psychic noise of the city, and through it, he could feel the cold, seething fury of the man as he received the news of his failed heist. The serpent had been poked, and it was angry. Good. But there was another presence he needed to connect with. One far more important. He sat, crossing his legs, and fell into a deep meditative state. He pushed his consciousness past the boundaries of the city, past the borders of Kalos, past the vast, churning ocean. He pushed it through the thinning veil between worlds. A journey that would have shattered any other mind. He was reaching for home. He was reaching for his queen. The connection, when it came, was not one of words or images. It was a pure, instantaneous merging of consciousness. A feeling of absolute belonging and understanding. He felt her presence, a vast, ancient, and deeply comforting consciousness that was the very soul of the Fey realm. Less than Naruto. Greater than Gardevoir's mental voice was a wave of relief and concern washing over him. Less than you are safe. The link between us, it was strained. The energies of that place are chaotic. Greater than. The mission was a success, he sent back. His thoughts clear and precise. Ether Corp is a front. The true hand is a man named Lysandre. I have confirmed their interest in Fey relics. And I have acquired allies. He shared the memories, the impressions. The whimsical, steely resolve of Valerie. The explosive, passionate loyalty of Flannery. The weary, brilliant grace of Diantha. He shared it all, holding nothing back. He helped Gardevoir's consciousness process the information, her ancient wisdom analyzing the complex personalities of these human women. There was a long pause, a moment of deep, contemplative silence that stretched across the dimensions. When her thought came again, it was tinged with an emotion he could not quite decipher. It was a complex chord of pride, concern, and something else, something that felt almost like sorrow. Less than you are weaving a new tapestry, my sage knight, greater than she communicated, her mental voice soft and melancholic. Less than one with threads I do not know. These women, they see the light within you. The light I have nurtured for so long. Greater than. They are strong, Naruto replied. They are guardians in their own right. They are valuable to the mission. Less than yes. The mission. Greater than there was another pause. Less than but they are also women. And you are a man. A powerful, charismatic man who has spent his life in a world devoid of his own kind. Be cautious, Naruto. The human heart is a far more complex and treacherous realm than even the Whisperwood Grove. Greater than. I am your knight, he affirmed, his thought a solid, unshakable oath. My loyalty, my heart, it belongs to the Fey realm. It belongs to you. This was the core of their bond. The truth that had existed between them for 2 decades. He was hers, and she was his, in a way that transcended the simple definitions of queen and knight. Less than I know, greater than her thought came, a whisper of deep, profound affection that warmed his very soul. Less than but your heart is larger than you realize. It has room for more than one world. Greater than she was not jealous. Her emotion was far more complex than that. It was the bittersweet pang of a guardian seeing their ward step into a larger, more complicated world, a world where they could no longer be the sole anchor. Less than Lysandre will not be idle, greater than she continued. Her voice regaining its regal focus. Less than your actions have accelerated his timeline. The trace you placed on him, use it. Uncover his true purpose. The theft of the starlit tear was not a simple act of greed. It is a piece of a larger, more terrible puzzle. Find the other pieces, my knight, before he can put them together. Greater than. The connection began to fade, the immense energy required to sustain it across the dimensional barrier beginning to wane. Less than be safe, Naruto. Greater than her final thought was a gentle, protective caress against his mind. Less than the Whisperwood waits for your return. Greater than. The link broke. Naruto opened his eyes, the brilliant lights of Lumio's city reflecting in their deep blue depths. He was alone again, a solitary guardian on a rooftop in an alien world. But he was not lonely. He was the Queen's gambit, her chosen piece on a board that spanned 2 worlds. And he was surrounded by a growing collection of unexpected, powerful, and utterly fascinating queens of their own. The game was afoot. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Symphony of 4. The salt spray of the Azure Bay was a gentle, rhythmic whisper against the cliffs, a stark contrast to the volcanic fury of Hoenn and the electric hum of Lumiose. Here, on the secluded edge of the Kalos coast, the world felt at peace. The villa was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines of white stone and sweeping panes of glass that invited the wild blue expanse of the ocean inside. It was one of Diantha's many private sanctuaries, a place so far off the grid that it existed on no public map, its location a secret, known only to a handful of trusted souls. Today, that number had grown by 3. Naruto stood on the wide, windswept balcony, his charcoal suit replaced by his familiar, comfortable Fey armor. The sea breeze felt clean against his skin, a welcome purification after the artificial environments he had endured. He watched the waves crash against the rocks below, a timeless display of gentle persistence and raw power. He was an island of calm, waiting for the final pieces of his unlikely alliance to arrive. Diantha had been ruthlessly efficient. Within hours of the museum incident, she had used her vast resources to arrange everything. A private, untraceable jet had been dispatched to Hoenn to retrieve Flannery under the guise of an inter-regional gym leader exchange program, a piece of bureaucratic fiction so boring that no one would ever question it. A private car had been sent to bring Valerie from Laver City, the driver one of Diantha's most trusted aides. Now, all he had to do was wait for the storm to gather. He felt Valerie's approach first. Her aura was a familiar, whimsical melody, a splash of vibrant color on the tranquil canvas of the coastline. She arrived not with the frantic energy of the city, but with a quiet, artistic appreciation for her surroundings. She stepped out onto the balcony, her dress a cascade of blues and greens that mimicked the ocean itself. A fortress of glass and light, perched between the sea and the sky, she said, her voice filled with a designer's appreciation. Diantha's taste is as impeccable as her public persona. It is a place of beautiful, elegant isolation. Her eyes then fell on him, and a genuine smile touched her lips. It suits you, Sir Knight. The wildness of the sea is a fitting backdrop for your spirit. It is a quiet place to plan a war, Naruto replied. His gaze still fixed on the horizon. Before Valerie could respond, a new energy signature slammed into the vicinity. It was not subtle or melodic, it was a percussive, fiery blast. A miniature sun of impatience and raw power. A moment later, Flannery stormed onto the balcony, looking profoundly out of her element. She had traded her usual shorts and top for a set of simple travel clothes. But she still radiated an aura of intense, barely contained heat. She scowled at the elegant furniture, the pristine glass, and the general lack of anything flammable. I hate flying, she announced to the world at large. Stuck in a metal tube for hours. And this place, it's too clean. Makes my skin crawl. Her amber eyes scanned Valerie, taking in the flowing dress, and the artistic demeanor with a look of frank skepticism. Then she saw Naruto, and her expression softened, just a fraction, into one of grudging respect. Or a man. Glad to see you're still in one piece. I heard on the news you tangled with some thieves in Lumiose. Sounded like you made a mess. A calculated one, Naruto corrected, turning to face them both. The final piece of their quartet arrived. Diantha stepped onto the balcony, having shed her movie star glamour for a simple but elegant pantsuit. Her aura was calm and focused, the weary actress entirely absent, leaving only the champion. She was the gracious host, but her eyes held the sharp, analytical gleam of a general surveying her troops. Valerie, Flannery, she said, her voice smooth and welcoming. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I trust your journeys were uneventful. Define uneventful, Flannery grumbled, kicking at the leg of a pristine white lounge chair. And so they stood, for a moment, in a tableau of palpable tension. The four of them were a study in contrasts. Flannery was a raging fire, all instinct and explosive power. Valerie was a gentle stream, all creativity and deep, flowing knowledge. Diantha was a glacier, beautiful, powerful, and possessed of a cool, strategic depth. And Naruto was the mountain, the unshakable center around which these disparate elements had gathered. Let's not waste time with pleasantries, Diantha said, gesturing towards the large glass table in the center of the balcony. We have an enemy to dissect. The initial dynamic, as they gathered around the table, was exactly as Naruto had anticipated, a minefield of conflicting personalities. Flannery slumped into a chair, her posture radiating impatience, her gaze constantly flicking around as if looking for a fight. Valerie examined a rare coastal flower in a vase on the table with the intense focus of a master jeweler, while Diantha projected a series of holographic screens into the air with quiet, efficient clicks on a tablet. Lysandre's public profile is flawless, Diantha began, her voice crisp and professional. A screen displayed the man's smiling face, surrounded by images of him opening hospitals and funding Pokémon preserves. He is a beloved innovator and a titan of industry. To the world, he is the future of Kalos. Yeah, well, the future looks like a stuck-up jerk with ridiculous hair, Flannery muttered. Earning a faint, amused smile from Valerie. His company, Lysandre Labs, is the largest tech provider for the Kalos League, Diantha continued, ignoring the interruption. The Why design everything from advanced Pokeball mechanics to the global PC storage system? He is woven into the very fabric of our society. A beautiful, but ultimately poisonous, thread in the tapestry, Valerie added. Finally looking up from the flower. His family crest, the flaming eye, it is an ancient symbol in Kalos, associated with a king who believed he could command the legendary Pokémon of life and death. A king who drove his kingdom to ruin through his own hubris. Flannery's eyes lit up with interest. So he's not just a greedy corporate stooge. He's got a god complex. That's way more fun to punch. The tension was still there, a low hum of skepticism between the three women. They were allies in theory, but they were still sizing each other up, testing the boundaries. Naruto knew he had to unite them. To transform this collection of powerful individuals into a true team. It was time to show them the full scope of the board they were playing on. He took a slow breath and closed his eyes. What you have uncovered is the public face of the threat, he said, his voice dropping slightly, taking on a resonant quality that commanded their immediate attention. But the war we are fighting is not for this world alone. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his mind. He opened the psychic channel that was a permanent, sacred part of his being, the link to his queen. He did not shield it or filter it. For the first time in the presence of other humans, he let it flow freely. The effect was instantaneous and profound. It was not a sound or a light. It was a presence. A vast, ancient, overwhelming consciousness flooded the balcony. The air grew thick with the scent of moon petals and starlight. The sound of the ocean seemed to deepen, to harmonize with a slow, planetary rhythm. For a moment, the three women felt the sheer, breathtaking scope of a world of pure, untamed life force, a realm of myth made real. It was a consciousness that held the wisdom of millennia, the power of a living God. And a compassion so deep it was almost painful. It was utterly terrifying and sublimely beautiful all at once. Flannery shot to her feet, her hand instinctively reaching for a Pokeball. Her entire body tensed for a fight against a power she couldn't comprehend. Valerie gasped, her eyes wide, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek as her artistic soul was overwhelmed. Met by a beauty she had only ever dreamed of. Diantha, the champion, remained seated, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the table, her composed exterior struggling to contain the sheer awe she was experiencing. Then, the presence focused. A voice, not of sound but of pure thought, echoed directly in their minds. It was Gardevoir's voice, channeled through Naruto. Less than be at peace, guardians. Greater than. The thought was not a command, but a wave of pure, calming energy. Flannery's fight or flight response subsided, replaced by a stunned reverence. Valerie's tears stopped, her soul soothed. Diantha's rigid posture relaxed. Less than you feel the truth of my knight's words, greater than the mental voice continued, its tone as serene and deep as the cosmos. Less than the man you know as Lysandre seeks to shatter T. He sacred barrier between my realm and yours. He does not seek partnership. He seeks dominion. He would bleed my world dry to fuel his own dark ambitions for yours. Greater than. The presence then addressed each of them in turn. Its perception so keen it felt as if it were looking into their very souls. Less than Valerie of Levere, greater than the thought came, gentle and appreciative. Less than you, who live in harmony with the great TR. And speak the language of the old ways. You see the pattern in the threads. Your wisdom is the loom upon which our victory will be woven. Greater than. Valerie bowed her head, a gesture of profound, instinctual respect. Less than Flannery of Laveridge. Greater than the voice shifted, its tone now resonating with a fiery respect that mirrored her own spirit. Less than guardian of the mountain's heart. Your spirit is the untamed fire of creation itself. Your passion is the forge where our weapons will be made sharp. Greater than. Flannery swallowed hard, her usual bravado completely stripped away, leaving only a raw, humbled warrior. Less than Diantha of Kalos, greater than the voice softened, tinged with an ancient sympathy. Less than the champion who wears a crown of light and a mantle of weariness. You bear the burden of a world's hope. Your strength is not just in battle, but in the grace with which you carry your heavy charge. Your strategic mind is the map by which we will navigate the coming darkness. Greater than. Diantha closed her eyes for a moment, a flicker of profound relief crossing her face. To be seen so completely, so truly, was a gift she had not realized she craved. Finally, the presence enveloped them all. Less than my knight is the sword and the shield of my realm. But a single sword, no matter how sharp, cannot win a war on two fronts. He has chosen his allies well. The sage knight and his queens of the human world. Serve him as you would serve your own world's hope. For in this battle, they are one and the same. Greater than. And then, as quickly as it had arrived, the overwhelming presence receded. It did not vanish, but pulled back, once again becoming a quiet, steady link that only Naruto could feel. The air returned to normal. The scent of salt and sea reclaimed the balcony. The only thing that had changed was everything. The tension was gone, shattered and replaced by a unified, unshakable sense of purpose. The skepticism in Flannery's eyes had been replaced by a burning fire of dedication. The artistic curiosity in Valerie's gaze had deepened into a profound, scholarly focus. The reserved professionalism in Diantha's demeanor had transformed into a resolute, personal commitment. They were no longer three women and a strange man. They were a council of war, blessed by a goddess. Naruto opened his eyes. Now, he said, his voice quiet but carrying the immense weight of the moment, let us begin. What followed was a symphony. The holographic displays came to life. No longer just Diantha's data, but a shared canvas. Diantha, her voice sharp and clear, laid out the enemy's physical presence. Lysandre Labs' headquarters is this tower in the heart of Lumio's city. 100 floors, biometric security on every level, and a private, militarized security force. But its greatest defense is its public image. It's a fortress masquerading as a landmark. Flannery leaned forward, her amber eyes blazing as she studied the tower's schematics. Look at this, she said, her finger jabbing at a holographic conduit. Main power grid is triple redundant. But it all flows through a primary geothermal tap 5 levels underground. They're doing the same thing they did on Mount Chimney, only on a smaller scale. If we could overload that tap, we could try. GGER a cascading blackout through the entire tower. It'd be a huge mess, but it would knock out 90% of their electronic security for at least 10 minutes. 10 minutes is an eternity, Naruto affirmed, nodding in approval. But a blackout would be a blunt instrument, Valerie countered, her gaze distant. She traced a finger through the air, pulling up historical maps of Lumio's city, overlaying them on the tower's modern schematic. The tower was built on the site of the old Kalos Royal Archives. Lysandre didn't excavate, he built over it. There are sealed, forgotten tunnels beneath the city. Catacombs. He thinks his foundation is solid rock, but it's built on a history he has forgotten. She highlighted a series of faint, almost invisible lines on the map. These tunnels could provide a covert point of entry, completely bypassing the first 20 floors of his security. A frontal assault to create a diversion, and a stealth infiltration through a forgotten path, Diantha mused. Her strategist's mind immediately seeing the potential. A classic pincer movement. I like it. She looked at Naruto. Lysandre himself operates from the penthouse. The Olympus Suite, he calls it. That has to be our final objective. His personal data core. Naruto listened, absorbing their input, his own senses stretched out, feeling the faint, distant pulse of the trace he had placed on Lysandre. He is not just hoarding data, Naruto said, his voice low. He is gathering artifacts. The starlit tier was one. The trace is vibrating with proximity to 2 other sources of immense, dormant power. Both located within that tower. They feel incomplete, like keys without a lock. They worked for hours, long after the sun had set and the sky had filled with a tapestry of stars that was mirrored in the dark, placid ocean. They were a perfect, synchronized unit. Diantha provided the high-level intelligence. Flannery provided the tactical demolition expertise. Valerie provided the deep, esoteric knowledge. And Naruto was the nexus, the one who could see the energy beneath the steel, the motive beneath the action, weaving their disparate threads of information into a single, cohesive plan. By the time the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold, they were finished. A complex, multi-layered, and incredibly dangerous plan of infiltration was laid out on the holographic display. A testament to their combined genius. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun rise. The initial friction of their first meeting felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. They had been forged into a single weapon in the crucible of shared purpose. Flannery, surprisingly, was the one who broke the comfortable silence. She looked from Diantha to Valerie, then to Naruto, a genuine, fiery grin on her face. "Okay," she said, cracking her knuckles. "I'm officially impressed. You guys aren't so bad for a movie star and a dressmaker." She then looked at Naruto. "And you, or a man, you've got one hell of a queen." The statement hung in the air, a simple, blunt acknowledgement of the truth that now bound them all. Their individual feelings for Naruto, Flannery's grudging respect, Valerie's artistic fascination, Diantha's intellectual and emotional intrigue, had not vanished. But they had been subsumed by something larger. They were not rivals. They were sister queens in his court, united in the defense of two worlds. The sea breeze picked up, cool and clean, a promise of the storm they were about to unleash. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Ether Bastion. The night air over Lumio's city was a chaotic symphony of sound and light, but high above the endless rivers of traffic, a different kind of storm was brewing. Lysandre Lab's tower was a needle of arrogant, gleaming steel piercing the belly of the clouds, its upper floors lost in the low-hanging mist. Tonight, this monument to corporate power was a battlefield, and the opening salvo was about to be fired by a creature of pure, incandescent rage. Flannery stood on the roof of a building several blocks away, the wind whipping her crimson hair into a frenzy. Her face, illuminated by the neon glow of the city, was a mask of intense, joyful concentration. Beside her, its massive form radiating a heat that warped the air, stood her Charizard. The Pokémon was a magnificent beast, its orange scales looking black in the low light. The flame on its tail burning with a fierce blue-white intensity that mirrored its trainer's spirit. "You feel that, boy?" Flannery murmured, her hand resting on Charizard's warm, leathery neck. "That tower, it's like a giant, steel ice cube. It's cold, arrogant. It needs to be taught a lesson about what real power looks like." Charizard let out a low, guttural rumble of agreement, smoke curling from its nostrils. Flannery tapped the small, discreet communication device in her ear. "Flannery to command. Phoenix is in the nest and ready to roast the turkey. You guys in position." Miles away, in the damp, forgotten darkness beneath the city, Valerie's voice came back, a calm, clear whisper against the sound of dripping water. "We are. The old catacombs are just as the archives described. A bit gloomy for my tastes, but the path is clear. Proceed when ready, Firefly." In another part of the city, Diantha's cool, professional tone joined the channel. "Eagle is in position. I've initiated a low-level security alert on the opposite side of the tower. A little ghost in the machine to draw their eyes away from the main event. You have a clear window, Flannery. Make it count." Flannery grinned, a feral, beautiful sight. With pleasure, she looked at her partner, her amber eyes blazing. "All right, Charizard, let's turn up the heat. Target the primary geothermal conduit. Just like we planned. Overheat." The Charizard took a deep, shuddering breath, its chest expanding. Its entire body began to glow with a brilliant, white-hot light, the flame on its tail erupting into a roaring inferno. It was not charging a simple flamethrower, it was gathering the very essence of its inner fire, pushing its own core temperature to the absolute limit. Then, it unleashed hell. It was not a stream of fire, but a solid, focused beam of pure, white plasma. The overheat attack shot across the night sky like a falling star in reverse, a silent, incandescent lance of pure energy. It struck the base of the Lysandre Lab's tower at the exact point Flannery had identified, the reinforced housing of the primary geothermal tap. The impact was not an explosion. It was a silent, terrifying flash of white light that momentarily bleached all color from the city. The reinforced plasteel and concrete, designed to withstand a direct missile strike, vaporized. The beam bored through 20 feet of armor and earth and slammed directly into the geothermal tap itself. The effect was instantaneous. A deep, groaning shudder ran through the entire 100-floor structure. Deep underground, the overloaded tap buckled, shunting trillions of joules of raw, unstable geothermal energy back up the conduit. Safety protocols screamed and then died as circuits melted. For a glorious 3 seconds, the entire lower third of Lysandre Lab's tower glowed from within like a giant, malfunctioning lantern. Then, the lights went out. A cascading blackout raced up the tower, floor by floor. A wave of darkness swallowing the building from the bottom up. Emergency lights flickered on, then sputtered and died as the secondary systems were overwhelmed. In less than 10 seconds, the proudest monument in Lumio's city was a dead, dark monolith, silenced by a single, perfectly placed blow. Flannery pumped her fist in the air. "Bullseye," she yelled into the comms. "The turkey is officially cooked. You've got your 10 minutes. Go, go, go." In the pitch-black catacombs beneath the tower, Naruto and Valerie didn't need the signal. They felt the shudder through the very stone around them. The oppressive hum of the tower's power grid, a psychic weight that had been pressing down on them, vanished, replaced by a sudden, profound silence. "Impressive," Valerie whispered, her voice laced with awe. She held a small, glowing crystal, its soft light illuminating the narrow, damp tunnel. "She is not a warrior. She is a force of nature. And you are the one who provides the path," Naruto said. His eyes already adjusted to the near-total darkness. To him, the world was a map of fading energy signatures and structural weaknesses. He could see the way forward as clearly as if it were midday. "This way. The sub-basement access shaft should be directly above us." He moved with a silent, liquid grace, Valerie following close behind. Her Sylveon, a creature of ethereal beauty, trotted silently at her heels. Its ribbon-like feelers extended, tasting the air for any unseen threats. They reached a point where the ancient stonework of the catacombs met the cold, smooth concrete of the tower's foundation. A circular maintenance grate was set into the ceiling. It was sealed with a magnetic lock, now dead from the power outage. But it was still 20 feet up, and impossibly heavy. "Allow me," Naruto said. He crouched, his body coiling like a spring. He was not just gathering his physical strength. He was drawing in the latent natural energy from the earth around him. A whisper of the senjutsu he had perfected in the Fey realm. He exploded upwards in a silent, vertical leap that seemed to defy gravity. He struck the grate with the palm of his hand, not with brute force, but with a focused, concussive pulse of aura. The heavy grate didn't just unlock, it was blasted upwards from its housing, landing on the floor of the sub-basement above with a deafening clang that echoed through the dead building. Naruto landed back on the catacomb floor as softly as a falling leaf. "After you," he said to the stunned designer. They entered the tower. The emergency lighting was non-existent this far down. The darkness absolute. But to Naruto, it was as clear as day. He saw the network of pipes and conduits, the dormant security drones in their charging stations, the H.E.T. signatures of the skittering Rattata in the walls. "Diantha," he spoke into his calm, his voice a low whisper. "Ghost is in the machine. We are proceeding to the server hub on floor 42. Copy that, Ghost," Diantha's voice replied, cool and steady. "Eagle is engaging hostiles on the upper floors. Lysandre's private guard is elite, well-trained. But they're confused, operating blind. They believe it's a simple power failure. They have no idea they're being invaded." On the 75th floor, in the marble-floored lobby of the executive suites, Diantha was a whirlwind of silver and shadow. She moved with a dancer's grace and a champion's lethal precision. The darkness was her ally. She and her Gardevoir were a perfectly synchronized unit, flowing through the corridors, neutrally. Zing the elite guards with a combination of disorienting psychic attacks and precise, non-lethal physical takedowns. They were not fighting a battle, they were conducting a silent, elegant coup. Her objective was not to fight her way to the top. It was to sow chaos, to pull the tower's internal security forces upwards, away from the central server hub, clearing a path for Naruto and Valerie. Every guard she and her Gardevoir disabled was one less obstacle for them. Floor 42 was the digital heart of Lysandre Labs. The server hub was a vast, cavernous room, filled with rows upon rows of monolithic black servers. Their blinking indicator lights now dark and dead. The only light came from the red glow of the emergency backup power that kept the core data banks from catastrophic failure. "The main data core is in the central chamber," Valerie whispered, her eyes scanning the room. "But the chamber itself will be shielded. A physical Faraday cage. Even with the power out, we won't be able to access it wirelessly." "We do not need to," Naruto said. He walked directly to the main access terminal, a large console that was currently dark. He placed his hands on it. "Sylveon, I need your help." Valerie's Pokémon padded forward, looking up at him with its intelligent, blue eyes. Your feelers, Naruto said, his voice calm and reassuring. They can sense emotional and energy currents. This machine is dead, but its memory, its data, still has a residual energy. A shape. I want you to extend your feelers, to touch the machine, and show me that shape. Show me the path to Lysandre's private files. Valerie watched in fascination as her Sylveon, a creature of emotion and fairy magic, did something utterly unexpected. It reached out with its ribbon-like appendages and gently touched the cold, dead terminal. It closed its eyes, concentrating. Naruto rested his hands beside the feelers, his own eyes closed. It was a perfect synthesis of the ancient and the modern. The fairy-type Pokémon was not a hacker. But it could sense the echoes of intent, the emotional weight of the data stored within. It could feel the pathways that had been most heavily used, the files that were guarded with the most paranoid secretive energy. It created a psychic map of the data's emotional landscape, and Naruto, with his ability to perceive and manipulate all forms of energy, could read that map. He saw it, a single, heavily encrypted, and deeply hidden partition. It was named not with code, but with a symbol, a stylized, flaming eye. I have it, he murmured. He opened his eyes and began to draw energy, not from the earth, but from his own core. He channeled a delicate, infinitesimally small current of aura from his fingertips into the dead machine. He was not powering the whole system, but a single, microscopic pathway. Following the map Sylveon had provided. It was like performing neurosurgery on a sleeping giant. On the dark screen of the terminal, a single folder icon flickered into existence. Valerie leaned in, her breath catching in her throat. Project. Ultimate Weapon. Naruto's fingers flew across the keyboard, his aura acting as a universal decryption key. Files opened, revealing schematics, historical records, and terrifying power-level projections. It's not a myth, Valerie whispered, her face pale in the red glow of the emergency lights. The ancient Kalos key, Ing, the one who nearly destroyed the world to achieve his goals, he built a machine. A weapon powered by the life force of Pokémon, capable of granting eternal life or unleashing absolute destruction. The records say it was buried, lost forever. Lysandre has not just found it, Naruto said, his voice grim as he absorbed the data. He has been excavating it, restoring it, the artifacts he is gathering. The starlit tier, they are not just keys. They are focusing lenses, components to enhance its power. Suddenly, the file they were viewing was slammed shut. A new symbol appeared on the screen, a large, flaming L. A cold, synthesized voice echoed from the terminal's speakers. A clever rat, to have scurried so far into my walls. But your time is up. The lights are coming back on. The main power grid kicked back in. The rows of servers hummed to life, their lights blinking green. The main lights of the hub flickered and then blazed to life, blindingly bright. Red alert klaxons began to blare, and heavy steel blast doors began to slam down, sealing the room. It's a trap, Valerie cried out, her Sylveon hissing at the terminal. On the comms, Flannery's voice crackled with urgency. Naruto, I'm seeing massive power surges all over the tower. He's rebooting everything, and he's bringing his own private network online. You need to get out of there. Diantha's voice was equally grim. He's cut me off. All internal comms are dead. He's rerouting all security to your position. Naruto, Valerie, can you hear me? You must evacuate. Naruto ignored the blaring alarms and the descending doors. His eyes were locked on the terminal screen, where a new file was now open, a live video feed. It showed the tower's penthouse, the Olympus suite. Lysandre was there, standing before a massive window overlooking the city. His back to the camera. He was not alone. In the center of the room, held in a crackling field of golden energy, was a man. He was tall and blond, dressed in a strange, tattered white coat. His face a mask of serene, almost detached suffering. But it was his aura that made Naruto's blood run cold. It was immense, ancient, and filled with a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical weight. It was the aura of a being who had lived for thousands of years. Who is that? Valerie whispered, her eyes wide with horror. I do not know his name, Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. But he is the power source. The living battery for Lysandre's weapon. A new figure stepped into the video feed. A man in a high-tech suit of blue and white armor, his face obscured by a helmet. He held a device that seemed to be controlling the energy field around the captive. And behind him, floating silently, was a Pokémon Naruto recognized from the deepest, most primal legends of the Fey realm. It was sleek and green, with a serpentine body and a hexagonal pattern on its skin. It was a creature of perfect, terrifying order. Zygarde, the protector of the natural balance of the world. And it was under Lysandre's control. It cannot be, Valerie breathed, her knowledge of Kalos' lore making the sight all the more horrifying. The CEO you met in the museum, he was not the true mastermind. A new voice said, this one not from the comms or the terminal, but from the shadows of the server room. Naruto and Valerie spun around. Standing by one of the now sealed blast doors was a man. He was impeccably dressed in a scientist's lab coat, his purple hair neatly coiffed. His face was calm, intelligent, and held a hint of weary resignation. It was Colres, a Controve, RSIAL scientist known for his research into drawing out the true power of Pokémon. The man in the blue armor is Xerosic, the true head of Ether's dimensional research, Colres explained, his voice calm despite the blaring alarms. And the man you are looking for, Lysandre, he is merely the public face. The charismatic leader, but the true villain, the one with the vision, is the one who has been pulling the strings from the very beginning. The camera in the penthouse feed turned, as if on cue. The captive, the scientist, the legendary Pokémon, they were all there. But now, sitting in a large, throne-like chair, was another figure. He was dressed in a pristine white suit, his features sharp and aristocratic. He held a single, perfect, eternally blooming white rose in his hand. It was the CEO from the museum gala. The man Naruto had dismissed as a mere subordinate. He looked directly into the camera, a cold, knowing smile on his face. You have been a fascinating anomaly, Sage Knight, the man said. His voice echoing from the terminal, calm and cultured. But your story ends here. You fight to protect a balance that is flawed. A world of sickness, of decay, of imperfection. I seek to create a new world. A beautiful world, cleansed by the fire of the ultimate weapon, a world where only the beautiful and the chosen may exist. The man in white stood up, gesturing to the captive. This is as the ancient king of Kalos himself, cursed with eternal life, the original creator of the weapon. His life force, and the power of the great Zygarde, will be the instruments of my beautiful, destructive art. He turned and escaped through a hidden panel, leaving his subordinates and the legendary Pokémon to guard the prisoner. Who is he? Valerie asked, her voice trembling. He is the true founder and leader of both Ether and Lysandre Labs, Colres said, a look of profound regret on his face. I joined him, believing we were pursuing the peak of scientific potential. I did not realize his goal was planetary genocide. He looked at Naruto, his gaze direct. He has sealed this tower. In 1 hour, he will fire the weapon, using its energy to tear a permanent gateway to your Fey realm. Believing its raw life force will give him the power to reshape reality itself. The blast door behind Colres suddenly hissed and retracted, revealing not an escape route, but a squatter. On of heavily armed Ether Foundation guards, their weapons raised. I cannot stop him, Colres said, raising his hands in surrender to the guards. But I can give you a fighting chance. I have led the lockdown protocols for one single elevator shaft. It goes all the way to the top. He was taken into custody, a man who had chosen the last possible moment to switch sides. The path was clear. The villain was revealed. The stakes were no longer just about two worlds, but about the end of everything. And the clock was ticking. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Weight of Three Worlds. The Elevat, or ride to the Olympus suite, was a silent, vertical journey through the heart of a dying beast. The blaring alarms had ceased, replaced by an eerie, humming silence as the tower's systems rerouted all remaining power to the penthouse. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and the palpable, psychic pressure of the two immense power sources gathered at the building's apex. Through the elevator's glass walls, they could see the floors they passed. Empty offices, deserted labs, and the occasional team of Ether guards scrambling to respond to the chaos Diantha and Flannery were still creating on the lower levels. Valerie stood with her back against the elevator wall, her face pale, her knuckles white where she clutched a fold of her dress. The sheer, world-ending scale of the villain's plan had shaken her to her artistic core. Her world of beauty, history, and elegant design was being threatened by a madman who sought to create his own twisted, sterile version of beauty through mass extinction. "A beautiful world," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and fury. "He speaks of beauty, but he knows nothing of it. True beauty is in the imperfections, the wildness, the struggle for life. He wants to create a perfect, silent, dead museum." Naruto stood in the center of the elevator, his feet planted, his posture a perfect pillar of calm in the rising storm. His eyes were closed, not in rest, but in intense concentration. He was not looking at the passing floors, he was looking at the energy. He could feel the raw, agonizing sorrow of the immortal king, as it was a psychic wound that had festered for 3,000 years, a grief so profound it was a power source in its own right. And he could feel the cold, implacable, and deeply unnatural order of Zygarde. The legendary Pokémon, the great balancer, was being forced to act against its very nature. Its energy was a coiled serpent of suppressed rage and confusion. "He is not a madman," Naruto said, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through Valerie's fear. "Madness is chaos. He is the opposite. He is a fanatic, devoted to a twisted, absolute order. He sees the chaos of life as a flaw to be corrected. He is a gardener who would burn down the entire forest because of a single weed." He opened his eyes, and they were shining with a brilliant, emerald light. He was drawing in the latent natural energy of the world. What little could filter through the steel and concrete of the tower, preparing himself. But his greatest flaw is his arrogance. He believes he is the only one with a vision. He cannot comprehend a power that is born not from control, but from harmony. The elevator slowed, a soft chime announcing their arrival. The doors opened, not to a scene of battle, but to one of serene, terrifying preparation. The Olympus suite was a cavernous space of black marble and stark white furniture. The far wall was a single, colossal pane of armored glass, showcasing a breathtaking, stormy view of Lumio's city. In the center of the room, the immortal king as still floated within his golden prison of energy, his head bowed, his expression lost in a timeless sorrow. Beside him stood the scientist Xerosic, his face a mask of cold, professional focus as he monitored a series of holographic displays that projected from his armored suit. And between them, a silent, emerald sentinel, was Zygarde. It was in its 50% form. A sleek, canine-like creature that seemed to be woven from living shadows and green light. Its multifaceted eyes glowed with an unsettling, blank intelligence. It was not acting of its own accord. Naruto could feel the control device on Xerosic's wrist, a technological leash on a god. Xerosic looked up as the elevator doors opened. There was no surprise on his face, only a dismissive, clinical curiosity. "The anomaly and the artist," he said, his voice distorted by his helmet's speakers. "Impressive, to have made it this far. But your journey ends here. You were witnesses to the glorious dawn of a new world, a privilege you will not live to appreciate." "There is no glory in genocide," Valerie shot back, her fear replaced by a sudden, fierce surge of defiant anger. Her Sylveon stepped forward, placing itself between her and the legendary Pokémon, its ribbons bristling, letting out a low, protective hiss. Xerosic let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Semantics. You see death. Our benefactor sees purification. Zygarde, eliminate them. Keep the Sage Knight alive, if possible. Our benefactor wishes to study the source of his unique energy." Zygarde's head tilted. The hexagonal cells on its skin began to glow with a menacing, green light. The sheer pressure of its aura, even under duress, was suffocating, a physical weight that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. Naruto moved. He didn't charge forward. He took a single, deliberate step to the side, placing himself directly between Xerosic and the captured king, his body a living shield. His focus was not on the legendary Pokémon. It was on the prisoner. "King of Kalos," Naruto's voice boomed, not with physical volume, but with the full, resonant power of his senjutsu-infused aura. He was not speaking to the man's ears, but directly to his ancient, weary soul. "I feel your grief, the loss of your beloved float, the terrible choice you made, the 3,000 years of wandering and regret. But your penance is not yet complete. You cannot allow your pain to be used as the instrument of this world's end. AZ's head slowly lifted. His eyes, clouded with the sorrow of ages, focused on Naruto. For the first time in millennia, he was not being looked at as a curiosity, a power source, or a ghost of history. He was being seen, truly seen, by someone who understood the language of his soul's suffering. Zerosik scoffed. Touching. But you cannot break a control forged by our benefactor himself. Zygarde, Land's Wrath. Zygarde opened its mouth, and a geometric pattern of brilliant green energy formed before it. It unleashed a devastating wave of power, a destructive force of nature that ripped up the marble floor as it shot across the room, a bulldozer of pure, earth-shattering energy. It was not aimed at Naruto. It was aimed at Valerie. Naruto had anticipated it. He had felt the cold, tactical logic of the scientist. Eliminate the weaker target first. He moved with a speed that was not human. He was a green and gray blur. He appeared in front of Valerie and her Sylveon just as the Land's Wrath was about to hit them. He did not try to block it. He did not try to deflect it. He held his hickory staff in front of him and drove it into the floor. The moment the staff, a conduit of pure, natural life force, touched the cold, artificial marble, an explosion of emerald light erupted from it. It was not a destructive explosion. It was an explosion of life. A dome of impossibly dense, interwoven roots and luminous green vines erupted from the floor, forming a perfect, living shield. The Land's Wrath slammed into the shield. The sound was a deafening roar of grinding, tearing power. The force of the attack was immense, the sheer kinetic energy cracking the armored glass of the penthouse window behind them. But the shield held. The roots groaned and splintered, but for every branch that was destroyed, two more grew in its place, fed by the constant stream of natural energy Naruto was pouring into them. The attack, born of nature but twisted by technology, was being neutralized by nature in its purest, most vibrant form. Valerie stared, her heart pounding, at the wall of living wood that had saved her life. Through the gaps in the roots, she could see Naruto, his body glowing with a soft, green light, his face a mask of serene concentration as he single-handedly held back the power of a legendary Pokémon. The attack subsided, leaving the room a wreck. Half the marble floor was torn to shreds. The living shield in front of Naruto and Valerie slowly receded back into the floor, leaving no trace of its existence. Zygarde stood, its cells pulsing, readying another attack. But something had changed. The immortal king, was now standing on his own 2 feet. The golden energy cage flickering around him. His eyes, once dull with sorrow, now held a single, burning spark of renewed purpose. Naruto's words, his selfless act of protection, had reached him. No more. The king whispered, his voice a dry, rasping sound, like stones grinding together after centuries of silence. My folly created this weapon. My grief will not be its fuel. He raised his hands, and the golden cage of energy that imprisoned him shattered into 1,000 motes of light. The power that had been siphoned from him for weeks surged back into his body. He was still a weary, ancient man, but he was no longer a passive victim. Zerosik stared, his professional composure finally cracking. Impossible. The control signal is absolute. Your technology can cage a body, a new voice said, cool and sharp, from the now open elevator doors. But it cannot cage a soul that has decided to be free. Diantha stood there, her Gardevoir at her side, her face a mask of cold fury. A few floors below, Flannery's Charizard let out a triumphant roar that could be heard even in the penthouse. The diversion was over. The cavalry had arrived. You were too late, champion, Zerosik snarled, his hand flying to the control device on his wrist, overriding Zygarde's previous command. The firing sequence has been initiated. In 5 minutes, this world will be purified. He pointed at the group. Zygarde, Core Enforcer, destroy them all. Zygarde's body began to glow, its form shifting. It drew its serpentine body into a tighter coil, and a massive, draconic head formed at its front, a single, baleful eye glowing in its chest. It was transforming, gathering its power into a single, ultimate attack. We have to stop it. Diantha yelled, her Gardevoir already charging a moonblast. No, Naruto's voice cut through the rising panic. Don't fight it. It is a part of this world's natural order. To harm it is to harm the world itself. He looked at Az, a silent understanding passing between them. We do not need to defeat it. We need to free it. He turned to face the charging legendary, his own body now blazing with a brilliant emerald aura. He was not preparing for a fight. He was preparing for a communion. Diantha, you're Gardevoir. I need a psychic link. Connect my mind to Zygarde's. He commanded. That's insane, she protested. Its consciousness is alien. It could shatter your mind. Do it. Diantha hesitated for only a fraction of a second. She trusted him. She nodded to her Gardevoir. The Pokémon's magenta eyes glowed, and a shimmering, pinkish thread of psychic energy shot out, connecting the side of Naruto's head to the charging Zygarde. The moment the link was established, Naruto's world exploded. He was no longer in the penthouse. He was everywhere and nowhere. He was a single cell in the root of a tree, a drop of water in the ocean, a gust of wind on a mountaintop. He was part of a vast, silent, and impossibly complex consciousness that was the planet's immune system. And he could feel the cage. He could feel the cold, artificial logic of Xerosic's control device, a matrix of technological code that was wrapped around the legendary's core consciousness, forcing it to obey, twisting its sacred duty into a mockery. He did not fight the cage with force. That would be like trying to punch a steel wall. Instead, he brought the full, harmonious power of the Fey realm. The memories of the Whisperwood Grove, the feeling of his queen's presence, and he let it flow through the psychic link. He introduced a concept that the cold logic of the control device could not process, the life force of another world. It was an organic, chaotic, and beautiful energy that was utterly incompatible with the rigid, binary code of the machine. The control matrix shuddered, trying to classify the new data, trying to contain it. But it couldn't. It was like trying to fit an ocean into a teacup. The matrix began to fracture, to glitch, to tear itself apart from the inside out. In the physical world, Naruto had dropped to one knee, his body trembling from the immense strain, blood trickling from his nose. Zygarde had stopped its charge, its body spasming. The glowing cells on its skin flickering erratically. It's working. Valerie cried out. Xerosic watched in horror, frantically tapping at the controls on his wrist. No, obey, obey me. It was then that Az made his move. The ancient king strode forward, his movements slow but filled with a 3,000-year-old purpose. He walked past the struggling legendary, his eyes fixed on the scientist. Xerosic, seeing the ancient, grief-stricken king walking towards him, fumbled for a weapon, a small plasma pistol. He fired. The bolt of plasma shot across the room. Az did not flinch. He did not dodge. He simply took the blast directly in the chest. His body was thrown backwards, but he did not fall. He was immortal. Pain was his oldest and most constant companion. He continued walking, a smoking hole in his tattered coat, his eyes burning with the cold fire of millennia of regret. He reached the terrified scientist, and with a strength born of endless sorrow, he grabbed the man's wrist and crushed the control device. The device sparked, smoked, and shattered into pieces. The psychic link in Naruto's mind snapped. The cage was broken. Zygarde let out a silent, psychic scream of pure, unadulterated rage. The oppressive, controlled aura vanished, replaced by the raw, untamed fury of a god unleashed. It turned its head, its true, baleful eye fixing on the now unarmed and terrified Xerosic. "Uh-oh," was all the scientist could say before the legendary Pokémon lunged, swallowing the man whole in a flash of green light and shadow. It did not kill him. It absorbed him, imprisoning him within its own cellular structure. A fitting cage for the man who had tried to cage a god. Zygarde then turned its attention to the firing mechanism of the ultimate weapon, a massive crystal that was pulsing with a sickening red light. With a roar that shook the tower to its foundations, it blasted the crystal with a pure, uncontrolled dragon pulse, shattering it into a million useless shards. The firing sequence was aborted. The weapon was broken. The great beast stood for a moment amidst the wreckage, its duty done. It looked at Naruto, then at Az. A silent, ancient understanding passed between them. Then, its body dissolved into thousands of glowing green cells that flew out through the shattered window and scattered into the winds, returning to the earth to rest. Silence descended upon the ruined penthouse. The crisis was over. Naruto staggered, caught by Diantha before he could fall. The psychic strain had been immense. He was exhausted, his reserves almost completely drained. Valerie rushed to AZ's side. The king was looking at his hands, a slow, wondrous look on his face. The wound in his chest was not healing. The curse of eternal life, tied as it was to the power of the ultimate weapon, had been broken when the weapon was destroyed. After 3,000 years, the king of Kalos was mortal once again. He looked at Naruto, a single, grateful tear tracing a path through the grime on his ancient face. "Thank you," he whispered. "You have freed us both." They stood there for a moment, four heroes in the ruins of a madman's dream. They had won. They had saved the world. But the cost was heavy. Naruto was drained. Diantha's public image was about to be thrown into a political firestorm. Valerie had seen a darkness that would forever haunt her beautiful view of the world, and Flannery, as her voice crackled over the now restored comms, had a whole lot of explaining to do to the Kalos League. The worlds were safe, but the scars of this battle, both visible and invisible, would remain. They had borne the weight of three worlds, the human world, the Fey world, and the private, internal worlds of their own hearts, and the gravity of that burden had changed them all forever. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Verdant Oath. The silence that followed the victory was heavier than any battle. In the pristine, minimalist sanctuary of Diantha's coastal villa, the 5-0. Them were adrift in the quiet aftermath, a collection of souls bound by a shared trauma and an uncertain future. The world outside was in an uproar. News reports, muted on a holographic screen in the corner, spoke of a catastrophic systems failure at Lysandre Labs, of the heroic intervention of Champion Diantha, and of the mysterious disappearance of both Lysandre and his enigmatic benefactor. The truth was a secret kept within the villa's white stone walls, a burden they now shared. Naruto sat in a meditative posture on the balcony, facing the endless expanse of the Azure Bay. He was not still. His body was a nexus of conflicting energies. The psychic backlash from severing a technological leash on a god had left deep, invisible wounds. His own aura, usually a calm, deep wellspring, felt frayed. Like a rope stretched to its breaking point. He was drawing in the clean, salt-tinged air, the gentle life force of the ocean, trying to weave his damaged essence back together, but it was a slow, arduous process. He was a guardian temporarily without his full strength, a warrior forced into a moment of deeply unwelcome vulnerability. Inside, the others existed in their own orbits of reaction. Diantha moved with a restless, coiled energy, fielding encrypted calls from Panic League officials and government ministers, her voice a mask of cool, professional control that betrayed none of the world-ending truths she now knew. Valerie sat by a window, a sketchbook open on her lap, but the pages remained blank. Her hand, usually so steady, seemed unable to translate the chaos of her thoughts into lines and shapes. She kept seeing the cold, beautiful vision of the villain, a man who would use genocide as a brushstroke, and it had introduced a profound ugliness into her world that she was struggling to process. Flannery was a caged tiger. She paced the length of the spacious living area, the raw, kinetic energy that defined her having no outlet. She had done her part, delivered the thunderous opening blow, but then had been forced to wait, listening over the comms as the true battle unfolded miles away. The helplessness had been a unique form of torture for her, and now, the enforced idleness was even worse. She felt a desperate need to hit something, to unleash her frustration in a torrent of fire, but there was nothing to fight. At the center of their quiet storm sat Az, the immortal king made mortal. He was wrapped in a simple blanket, looking impossibly ancient and fragile. The 3,000-year curse had lifted, but it had left him adrift in a time he did not know. His body finally beginning to feel the weight of its unimaginable age. Yet, his eyes, when they occasionally opened, were clear for the first time in millennia. He was a living library of forgotten history, and it was he who finally broke the silence. He is not finished. His voice was a dry whisper, but it cut through the room with the authority of ages. All activity ceased. Diantha ended her call. Valerie looked up from her empty page. Flannery stopped her pacing. They all turned to the ancient king. The weapon in the tower was a tool of convenience, as continued, his gaze fixed on some point in the distant past. A creation of my rage and grief, repurposed by his cold ambition. But it was never his only path. The original accord, he will seek to unmake it at its source. Naruto opened his eyes. the emerald glow within them dim but still present. He rose and walked inside, his movements stiff, a visible sign of the toll the last battle had taken. The Accord Site, he said. The words both a statement and a question. The legends in the Fey realm speak of it. A place where the veil is thinnest. Where the two worlds touch. Az nodded slowly. It is not a place that can be found on any modern map. It is an island in the Hoenn Sea, a place that exists, in between. It is where my ancestors first made contact with the Fey, where the pact of non-interference was sealed with a celestial event as its witness. He looked at them, his ancient eyes filled with a new, dawning horror. A celestial event that is about to repeat itself. Diantha's fingers flew across her tablet, cross-referencing astronomical charts with the fragments of lore Valerie had been researching. The verdant convergence, she breathed, her face paling. Astronomers call it the Lyra Aurora. AP. Planetary alignment that creates a unique, high-energy aurora borealis, visible even in the southern hemisphere. It happens once every 1,000 years. And it begins, at dusk, tomorrow. He will be there, Flannery said, her restlessness finally finding a focus, hardening into a sharp point of violent intent. He'll use this, convergence, to do what the weapon failed to. To rip the door open for good. But how do we find an island that doesn't exist on any map? Valerie asked, the practical problem cutting through her existential dread. Flannery's lips twisted into a grim, determined smirk. For the first time since arriving, she was back in her element. Hoenn is my turf, and it's full of old ghost stories and Sayla's myths. An island that appears and disappears. A place where the sky glows green and strange creatures are seen. I've heard those tales my whole life. She pulled out her own communication device, her fingers dialing a number from memory. My grandfather was the former Hoenn Elite Four champion. He spent his retirement chasing legends. He mapped every damn ghost story from Sutopolis to Pacifidlog. If anyone knows where to find a place that isn't supposed to exist, it's him. The journey was a tense, quiet affair. Flannery's grandfather, a grizzled, powerful old man with eyes that had seen 1,000 battles, had indeed known the legend. He had provided them with an ancient, hand-drawn sea chart and the use of his own private vessel, a sleek, military-grade speedboat, stripped of all markings, designed for speed and stealth. They skimmed across the waves, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and crimson. The air grew cooler, the sea calmer, as they entered a patch of ocean known to sailors as the Whispering Shallows. The water here was an unnatural shade of turquoise, and strange, glowing formations of coral were visible deep below. Naruto stood at the prow of the boat, the sea spray cool on his face. He was still depleted, the frayed edges of his aura stubbornly refusing to mend. The psychic wound was deep, and the chaotic, artificial energies of the human world offered little for him to draw upon to heal. He felt like a tree uprooted and transplanted into barren soil. Diantha came to stand beside him, her usual poise replaced by a quiet, genuine concern. You're pushing yourself too hard, she said, her voice low, meant only for him. The battle with Zygarde, what you did, it would have shattered any other mind. You need to rest. There will be time for rest when both worlds are safe, he replied, his gaze locked on the horizon. He is not just a threat to my world, Diantha. His beautiful world has no place for the passionate, the flawed, the free. No place for a spirit like Flannery's. No place for the gentle creativity of Valerie. No place for a weary champion who dreams of a life beyond the stage. His words struck her with their usual, unnerving perception. He saw them all so clearly. She looked back at the others. Flannery was at the helm, navigating with a fierce, focused intensity. Valerie was sitting near the stern, sketching the strange, glowing coral, her artistic spirit finally ending a way to process the beautiful and the terrifying by capturing it on paper. They were so different, these women now bound to him. And yet, she could feel the unspoken truth that connected them all, a fierce, growing devotion to the man who stood beside her. We will not let you face him alone, she said, her voice firm with the conviction of a champion's oath. As the sun finally touched the horizon, they saw it. At first, it was just a shimmer in the air, a distortion like heat haze. Then, as they drew closer, it resolved into a solid form, an island coalescing out of the twilight mist. It was a place of black, basaltic rock, twisted and ancient, rising from the sea like the bones of a long-dead leviathan. No trees grew here, only a strange, bioluminescent moss that covered the rocks in shifting, intricate patterns of soft, green light. Flannery cut the engine, and they drifted the last few hundred feet in an odd silence. The air here was different. It felt thin, ancient, and charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on their arms stand on end. The scent of salt and sea was mingled with something else, a smell of ozone, of old magic, and of the same moon-petal bee blossoms that grew in the Whisperwood Grove. This was a place where the skin of reality was worn thin. They disembarked onto a beach of black sand that glittered as if mixed with crushed emeralds. Following a path of softly glowing moss, they made their way to the island's center. There, in a shallow, natural amphitheater, stood the Accord site. It was a circle of 9 monolithic standing stones, each one carved from a single piece of obsidian-like rock that seemed to drink the twilight. The stones were covered in carved symbols, some of which Valerie recognized from ancient Colossian lore, but most of which were utterly alien. Flowing and organic, more like a written language of nature than of man. In the center of the circle, the air itself seemed to shimmer, a faint, translucent curtain between their world and another. The sky above was beginning to change. The deep indigo of dusk was being streaked with ribbons of impossible color, emerald green, soft violet, and a shimmering, ethereal silver. The verdant convergence was beginning. "We are running out of time," Diantha said, her voice hushed with reverence for the ancient, powerful place. "Before the battle begins," Naruto said, turning to face them. His expression serious, vulnerable. "There are things you must know. The full truth. Not just of the threat we face, but of me. Of my world." He led them to the center of the stone circle, the air growing thick and warm around them. They sat upon the moss-covered rocks, a small council of war gathered at the end of the world. And Naruto told them everything. He spoke of his first life, the loneliness, the feeling of being an outcast. He spoke of tumbling through the veil at a forgotten shrine, a scared and crying child, and being found not by monsters, but by a being of sublime grace and power. He described the Whisperwood Grove, its perpetual twilight, its symphony of life. He spoke of his training, not with swords and shields, but with aura and the very life force of the world. Learning to feel the heartbeat of the forest, to speak with the Pokémon not as a trainer but as a brother. And he spoke of his queen, Gardevoir. He described her not as a ruler, but as a mentor, a mother. A guardian who had saved him from a world that did not want him and raised him to be the protector of a world that did. He explained his role as the Sage Knight, the enforcer of the Accord. The living bridge between the two realms. The 3 women listened in captivated silence. They were not just hearing a story, they were seeing his soul. They saw the deep, unshakable foundation of his being, the source of his impossible calm and his terrifying power. They finally understood that he was not just a powerful man, he was the product of a world of myth and magic, its champion and its most beloved son. As he finished his tale, a profound silence settled over the stone circle, broken only by the whisper of the sea. "So, you're literally a fairy tale knight," Flannery said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, stripped of its usual bravado. "And you're fighting for your queen." "She is more than my queen," Naruto said, his gaze distant, lost in a memory of a gentle, psychic touch. "She is the heart of the world that gave me a home." It was in that moment of shared, vulnerable truth that it happened. The shimmering curtain of air in the center of the circle began to glow. It was not a violent tearing, not a crude, artificial portal. The light intensified, a soft, silver-white radiance that pulsed in time with the ribbons of color in the sky above. The scent of moon petals became intoxicatingly strong. The very air grew thick with a psychic presence that dwarfed anything they had ever felt, a presence that made Naruto's link seem like a candle next to a star. A figure began to coalesce from the light. It did not step through, it was woven from the twilight and the aurora, a being of pure energy and thought taking physical form. Queen Gardevoir stood before them. She was more radiant, more powerful, and more terrifyingly beautiful than Naruto's words could ever have described. Her form was a manifestation of pure, benevolent grace, her magenta eyes holding the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes. The red fin on her chest pulsed with a soft, steady, and overwhelmingly powerful light. Her presence was not a force of intimidation, but of absolute, undeniable truth. It was like looking at the living soul of nature itself. Valerie let out a soft, choked gasp, her artist's soul completely and utterly overwhelmed. This was the ideal, the perfect form of beauty she had been chasing in her art her entire life, made real. Flannery, the fiery warrior, found herself unable to move, her spirit, for the first time, in the presence of a fire far older and more powerful than her own. Diantha, the champion, a woman accustomed to being the most powerful presence in any room, felt a wave of profound, humbling awe. She was in the presence of true royalty, a power not of title or of strength, but of being. Naruto immediately knelt, bowing his head. "My queen." The voice that answered echoed not in their ears, but in the deepest parts of their minds, a symphony of crystal chimes and ancient starlight. "Less than rise, my knight. You have no need to kneel. Not before me, and not before your queens. Greater than." The three women started at the title, their hearts pounding. Gardevoir's gaze, ancient and impossibly perceptive, fell upon each of them in turn. It was not a gaze of judgment or jealousy. It was a gaze of profound, soul-deep understanding. "Less than I have watched you through my knight's eyes," greater than she communicated, her thoughts washing over them like a warm, gentle tide. "Less than I have felt your courage, your passion, your grace. I have seen the way your hearts have turned towards him, and the way his heart, in turn, has made room for you. Greater than." She glided forward, her feet not touching the mossy ground. She stopped before them, a radiant trinity of human strength and a single, divine Fey sovereign. "Less than for centuries." The accord was a pact between two worlds, a line drawn in the sand to prevent conflict. But the actions of your world have broken it. A new pact must be forged. Not a treaty of nations, but an oath of the heart. Greater than. Her magenta eyes, filled with starlight, focused on Naruto. "Less than my sage knight is the guardian of my realm. But he is also a son of yours. He can no longer be one or the other. He must be both. He must be the bridge. And a bridge cannot be anchored on only one side." Greater than. She turned her gaze back to the women, and the sheer force of her benevolent wisdom was a palpable thing. "Less than you love him. Each in your own way. Your fire gives him strength, Flannery. Your vision gives him clarity, Valerie. Your grace gives him balance, Diantha. You are the anchors he needs in this world. You have become as vital to his spirit as the Whisperwood Grove itself." Greater than. There was no jealousy. There was no rivalry. In that moment, in the face of this ancient, wise being, such petty human emotions felt like dust. There was only a profound, humbling truth. They all loved him, and his heart, a heart nurtured by a world of boundless life, was vast enough to hold them all without diminishing any of them. "Less than the old accord is broken," greater than Gardevoir's thought echoed, grand and momentous. "Less than I propose a new one. A verdant oath. A pact not of separation, but of union. Swear to me that you will stand beside him. That you will be his guardians in this world, as I am in mine. That you will lend your strength to his, your heart to his. Swear this, and you will not be rivals for my knight's affection. You will be his queens, united with him and with me in the defense of all life." Greater than. It was an offer of breathtaking scale. It was not a request to share a man, it was an invitation to join a pantheon. To become pillars of a new reality between the worlds. Diantha was the first to find her voice. She stepped forward and knelt, not in servitude, but as a knight taking an oath to a fellow sovereign. "On my honor as champion of Kalos," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I swear to be his balance. I accept the verdant oath." Valerie stepped forward next, her eyes shining with tears not of sadness, but of profound inspiration. She curtsied deeply. "As a daughter of the great tree of Lever," she said, her voice filled with artistic passion, "I swear to be his clarity. I accept the verdant oath." Finally, Flannery stepped forward. She did not kneel or bow. She stood tall, her fists clenched at her sides, and met the Fey Queen's gaze with her own fiery, unwavering stare. "As the guardian of Mount Chimney's heart," she declared, her voice rough with emotion, "I swear to be his strength." A fierce, genuine grin spread across her face. "I accept the verdant oath." A wave of profound, beautiful energy washed over the island as the oaths were sealed. Gardevoir inclined her head, a gesture of immense, regal approval. Less than then the pact is made. Greater than she turned to Naruto, who had risen to his feet. His face a mask of awe and overwhelming emotion. Less than the enemy approaches. He seeks to use the convergence to tear down the walls. We shall use it to build a fortress. My knight, you are wounded. Depleted. Let your queens grant you their strength, as you have granted them your protection. Greater than. She gestured for them to form a circle, Naruto at its heart. Join hands, Naruto said, his voice thick with a power that was already beginning to build. Gardevoir placed her ethereal, three-fingered hands on his shoulders. Diantha, Valerie, and Flannery took his hands, and each other's, forming a lost circuit of 5 beings at the nexus of 2 worlds. The celestial alignment above them reached its peak, and a solid, brilliant beam of pure green and silver light descended from the heavens, hing the stone circle in its divine radiance. Now, Gardevoir commanded. They poured their essence into him. Flannery gave her fire, a raw, untamed passion that coursed through him, burning away his fatigue and reforging his frayed aura with volcanic strength. Valerie gave her creativity, a gentle, flowing energy that patched the psychic wounds in his mind, not with brute force, but with intricate, beautiful patterns of healing light. Diantha gave her grace, a cool, strategic energy that sharpened his senses, focused his mind, and settled his spirit with the unshakable poise of a champion. A.N.D. Gardevoir, she gave him the heart of her world. A torrent of pure, ancient, and boundless life force, the very essence of the Fey realm, surged into him. It was a power that healed, empowered, and transformed. Naruto threw his head back and roared, a sound that was not just of his own voice, but of 1,000 Pokémon, of the rustling leaves of the Whisperwood, of the crashing waves of Azure Bay, of the beating heart of a volcano. The emerald light in his eyes exploded, his entire body enveloped in a blazing, verdant aura. The wounds in his spirit were not just healed, they were filled with a power greater than any he had ever known. He was no longer just the Sage Knight. He was a living embodiment of the pact between 2 worlds, empowered by the love and strength of his 4 queens. He opened his eyes, and they blazed with the power of the verdant convergence itself. He looked up at the sky, towards a single, dark speck that was rapidly approaching from the horizon. Valerius was coming, and the sage and his queens were ready. Chapter 9 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.